With an out-of-this-world intelligence, he starts manufacturing an Iron Man armor. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 is locked by an intercontinental missile, and you suggest ignoring it? On this large screen, it can be seen that there seem to be two extremely fast little red dots approaching from behind. Detected to have been located by an intercontinental missile. Please respond, operator. Current threat level, low. Recommended to ignore. As the little red dot approached, such subtitles suddenly popped up on the screen in front of the mecha. Lin Shen, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat, couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this scene. The people on the main console can naturally see everything inside the mecha through the projection screen. For example, the subtitles that popped up now. Zihuan didn't know what to say at this time. The tracking of two intercontinental missiles. The threat level is only low. What kind of threat can achieve high level? Is it considered high level only when it is attacked by nuclear weapons? It is also recommended to ignore. If this thing can be ignored, children, as the most advanced air defense system in the country. Lin Shen seemed to have expected this. He only glanced at it slightly and no longer paid attention to the intercontinental missile behind him. But it can be seen from the radar that the speed of the two missiles is constantly increasing, and soon it is almost on par with the mecha. It has reached an astonishing Mach 7, and this acceleration has not ended yet. After all, the speed of the intercontinental missile reaches its highest peak, which can exceed Mach 10. Lin, why are you still standing there? Hurry up and find a way to get rid of the missiles. If it doesn't work, you can use weapons to destroy the missiles. Are you really waiting for him to blow you up? Zihuan looked at Lin Shen, who was operating the mecha, with a calm face and even without any action, and he was a little anxious. Please, you are really facing two intercontinental missiles now. The power of this thing can even blow up half a city. Is it reasonable for you to be so calm? Although the mecha looks more durable than the Iron Man armor, the power of the missile is also different. Don't worry, I just left the sky above the ice city. If we destroy the missile here, the huge shockwave will affect the city. I have to lead this thing farther away. As Lin Shen spoke, he finally started to operate. His hands kept tapping on the virtual screen in front of him. The buttons kept flashing and extinguishing, and the complicated operation made everyone unable to follow. Then, Zihuan and Professor Wang, who were always paying attention to the status of the mecha on the console, found that the current status of the mecha seemed to have changed. Driving mode, Master. All mecha operation permissions have been unlocked. Driving status, straight flight. Body temperature, 307 degrees Celsius. Current speed, 7.6 Mach. Driving rating, S. Current status, everything is normal. Maintaining altitude, 10,000 meters. Wait, what's the matter with this master-level operation? Could it be that the kid secretly flew over the mecha when he built it? But this time it attracted the air defense system. How could it not have attracted it last time? Looking at the suddenly changing screen, Zihuan was already incomparably shocked. Professor Wang rolled his eyes. You have to change your bad habit of not thinking. This mecha was developed by Lin, so what's wrong with him being able to operate it? As soon as these words came out, the corners of the mouths of the other people present twitched slightly. Although they felt that what they said made some sense, they always felt that something was wrong. Just like an analogy, an engineer who makes a rocket may not be able to drive a rocket. Isn't this the same principle? But this point seems a little inappropriate if it is used on Lin Shen. But no matter what, if you really want to talk about it, the master operation mode is definitely better than the novice. Then, something happened that shocked everyone. At present, the speed of the mecha has begun to soar straight, from less than 8 Mach. It has soared to 10 Mach in almost a few minutes. This is more than twice the 5th-generation supersonic fighter developed by Eagle Sauce, and it is a non-streamlined flying body-like mecha. If this kind of thing is announced to the world, I am afraid that the entire world scientific community will be shaken. 10 Mach. This is 10 times the speed of sound. This kid. Halfway through, Zihuan felt that his brain was a little down, and he suddenly couldn't react to what to say next. Not to mention him, even the more stable Professor Wang was pinching his philtrum at this time. He looked like he was about to faint. Seeing this scene, Gozian hurriedly ran up to support the two. These two are the masters of the scientific community, and they must not get into trouble here. After patting the professors on the back and calming them down for a while, the two professors finally relaxed a little, but their heartbeats were already much higher than normal. They were obviously still in an extremely excited state. At the same time, Minister Li called again. "Old Z, can you notify us first if there is anything next time?" Last time, it was fortunate that the operator of the Iron Man armor was fine, otherwise I would not be able to handle it in Shantou. It's the same this time. This is a mecha that can fly at 10 times the speed of sound. If anything happens, I won't be able to afford it even if I lose 10 heads. On the other end of the phone, Minister Li's voice was a little tearful. He really had no choice. Two things happened to him in a short period of time. If it were a normal person, he would have been overwhelmed. Zihuan and Professor Wang also had helpless expressions on their faces. It was indeed their fault the first time. They forgot to notify. This time, they didn't react at all. After all, who could have imagined that this huge piece of iron weighing several tons could fly just by saying so? They were still in shock. The data was almost off the charts, but it showed that everything was normal. In such an extremely shocking situation, who could still think of reporting this matter? I'm afraid that even reason has been thrown out of the window. But this mecha is really good. It can fly so fast. Maybe it really has a chance to get rid of 2 intercontinental missiles. I just don't know what the fastest speed of this thing is. Minister Li took a deep breath. As the Air Defense Department in the base, they can naturally monitor the speed of flying objects in the air. Moreover, this matter is related to mechas and intercontinental missiles, so he has already applied to the higher authorities to use satellites to monitor the speed of mechas. Otherwise, relying on their means alone, they cannot observe the terrifying speed between mechas and missiles. At this moment, Professor Wang seemed to suddenly remember something and spoke quickly. Minister Li, can the satellite monitoring footage on your side be connected to ours? Chapter 52. Doing nothing can cause ICBMs to run out of fuel. As soon as Professor Wang spoke, Minister Li agreed immediately. After all, Zihuan and Professor Wang are both experts in mechas. If they can clearly know the data dynamics of the mecha, perhaps they can think of a solution. The screen was quickly connected, and a projection screen appeared on the other side of the console. In the projection screen, it was the picture captured from the space satellite. It can be seen that there is a silver-white mecha flying in a straight line in the clouds. At this time, not far behind the mecha, there are 2 streams of light flying quickly. Everyone hurriedly looked at the data and saw that the speed of the mecha remained at Mach 10 and did not continue to increase. On the contrary, the speed of the intercontinental missile has already increased to Mach 12. It seems that if the speed of the mecha continues like this, it will be caught up by the intercontinental missile sooner or later. Thinking of this, everyone's face began to become serious. Even some young researchers present turned pale. They dared not imagine the consequences of the mecha being caught up by the intercontinental missile. They would undoubtedly be blown to pieces. Lin Shen and Lin Shen inside the airport naturally had no chance of survival. However, before they could contact Lin Shen, they saw Lin Shen continue to operate through the screen of the main console. His index finger kept pressing on the virtual screen in front of him like a fairy. At this speed, even the world's top piano master would have to respond with a sigh of shame. Then, in everyone's sight, the speed of the mecha continued to soar. 10 Mach is still not the limit of the mecha. Although this is already very shocking, it seems that a slight increase in speed is not enough to shock everyone. Everyone's psychology is slightly immune. Zihuan and Professor Wang often exhaled. But it is obvious that the speed of the intercontinental missile is faster. Before he captures the target, he will always be in a state of increasing speed. It will not end until it reaches the maximum speed. Everyone still couldn't help but sweat, wondering whether the mecha can successfully avoid the tracking of the intercontinental missile. While Lin Shen was increasing the speed of the mecha, he was also looking at the direction they were in. He was now flying towards the sea at a very fast speed. Although the ice city was very far away from the sea, The speed of the mecha was too fast. In just over 10 minutes, it had almost crossed 2/3 of the distance. However, the next 1/3 was the real life and death speed. However, as a driver, Lin Shen did not think so. There was still no trace of panic on his face, but he continued to operate calmly. After a while, the speed of the mecha had soared to Mach 15. This is also the limit of the flight speed of intercontinental missiles. The speeds reached by the mecha and the two intercontinental missiles are already the same, and the distance between the two is at least more than 5 kilometers. This is already a very safe distance. Seeing this, everyone, including Minister Li, slowly breathed a sigh of relief. It turns out that this thing can actually fly so fast. It's much more powerful than the Iron Man armor. Looking at the content in the picture, Minister Li said in amazement. Zihuan and Professor Wang couldn't help but let out a long sigh. In just over half an hour, they had experienced too many shocks. Maybe their spirits could bear it, but their old and frail bodies couldn't bear it. But they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Lin Shen was indeed a genius. He could even design something like a mecha. By the way, Zilin, can your fuel hold up? Zihuan suddenly thought of this question and asked hurriedly. Old man Z, don't make a mistake. This mecha is most likely using controlled nuclear fusion fuel. This is nuclear energy, the highest standard fuel in the world. Speaking of fuel, Old man Zhuo, an expert in the nuclear fusion project, couldn't help but speak. Zihuan's question seemed to be as if he was doubting whether controlled nuclear fusion was durable. But with such a terrifying flight speed, a lot of fuel must be consumed in a short period of time. Although controlled nuclear fusion can generate huge energy, I'm afraid the amount is not enough. Zihuan immediately glared back. As soon as this was said, everyone could not help but frown slightly. Yes, controlled nuclear fusion can only generate a lot of energy, but the mecha is only so big. In addition to some normal components, how much energy can it store? Even if controlled nuclear fusion is installed inside the mecha like the energy core, I am afraid that the speed of production is not even as fast as the speed of consumption of the mecha. Thinking about this, the mood that had been relaxed seemed to be lifted again. It was really as exciting as a roller coaster. Don't worry, everyone, the fuel of the mecha is not the nuclear energy you imagine, but the hydrogen energy after conversion. The mecha itself has the original parts for converting nuclear energy into hydrogen energy, and this time the mecha took off only after it was fully charged. Not to mention that there is controlled nuclear fusion in the energy core that is constantly generating energy, and this part of energy can even be converted into backup storage energy. So far, the energy consumption has just reached 1% of the entire mecha after flying for so long. Lin Shen's leisurely voice came. Hearing this, everyone first exhaled slowly, then his face showed a look of shock again. What the hell is this? Flying at such a terrifying speed for nearly 20 minutes, it only consumed 1% of the total energy? In other words, as long as Lin Shen is willing, he can even fly at a speed of Mach 15 for 200 minutes. What a terrifying concept. What is important is not the flight time, but the speed of the flight. Intercontinental missiles cannot fly for such a long time. At most, they may reach their limit after flying for another half an hour. In other words, even if Lin Shen does nothing now, just maintaining the flight speed of the mecha, it can completely consume the fuel of the intercontinental missile, causing it to fall and explode on its own. Suddenly, everyone felt that they seemed to have worried for nothing. No wonder the danger level of the mecha detection is negligible. Thinking of this, both Professor Wang and Zihuan couldn't help but twitch their mouths slightly. Minister Li, who was connected to the other end of the phone, also had the urge to curse. Chapter 53 Extreme Operation, Waltz in front of missiles. Didn't they worry for a long time in vain? Fortunately, their psychological endurance was a little stronger. If it was a little worse, wouldn't they have died on the spot? Zihuan clenched his fists tightly and made up his mind to teach Lin Shen a lesson when he came back. So this might be a feeling of wanting to give a surprise, but surprises are not given in this way. You can say it out loud and then test it, and these old bones will also feel very surprised. However, if it goes straight to the sky now, it is not a surprise at all but a shock. Okay? In the airspace of China, the mecha with 2 intercontinental missiles is flying rapidly towards the customs. At this time, Minister Li has already greeted the customs. Next, a mecha with 2 intercontinental missiles will be detonated on the sea surface, so that they should not panic or make any special moves. In fact, the people at the customs did not believe what Minister Li said. What about mecha? Could it be that he was obsessed with the movie and has not come back to his senses yet? How could there be such a thing as mecha in this world? Although they thought so in their hearts, they had to obey the orders from their superiors after all. Why haven't they come yet? We've been waiting for more than 10 minutes. Where are the mechas and intercontinental missiles? The Minister of Customs and Border Defense was looking at the sky impatiently. He scanned the surroundings and kept looking at the radar detection. However, everything was the same as usual, and there was no movement at all, not to mention mechas and intercontinental missiles. Even a bird could not be seen at a glance. Isn't it that this old man has deceived me? The Minister of Border Defense muttered, and his face had turned dark. The adjutant next to him also had a puzzled look on his face. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. This kind of news is almost a military order. If the military order is falsely reported, it will be a military court. Minister Li should not be so ignorant of the seriousness of the matter. Hearing this, the Minister of Border Defense also nodded. He also believed that Minister Li should not joke with him so wantonly. Even if the relationship between the two is close, this joke is not allowed. However, while the two were waiting, a rumbling sound suddenly appeared in the air. When he subconsciously looked up, he could only see a silver-white electric light flashing by. The strong airflow almost blew the two people to the ground. Fortunately, they reacted in the first time and grabbed the pole beside them. The Minister of Border Defense and the adjutant both widened their eyes, and they hurriedly looked at the radar. It can be seen on the radar that there are 3 small red dots flying overseas at a lightning speed. The one in front should be the mecha that Minister Li just called to talk about. The terrifying detection speed on the radar shows that the speed of the mecha has reached a terrifying Mach 15. This is the peak speed of an intercontinental missile. Just when they saw this, 2 more streams of light flew in the air. This time they could see clearly that they were obviously the 2 intercontinental missiles following behind. The 3 streams of light flew quickly outside the customs. The Minister of Border Defense and the adjutant could only stare at each other in amazement. Damn it, the mecha is real. When did our Chinese technology develop to this level? Did I travel through time while sleeping? In his excitement, the Border Defense Minister even cursed. The adjutant was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground, and he was speechless. The two rubbed their eyes and looked at the radar screen again, but they could still clearly see the 3 small red dots on the radar that seemed to be flying far away. In another 2 blinks, they had arrived at the edge of the radar of the customs base. This place was already deep in the sea. At the same time, Lin Shen, who was operating the mecha, clicked a button at random. Then his index finger began to dance rhythmically. As the buttons on the virtual screen lit up one after another, the mecha, which was originally flying in a straight line at a terrifying speed, began to slow down. Then it twisted sideways and rushed towards the intercontinental missile behind it. Professor Zihuan, Wang, and Minister Li, who were connected to the satellite screen and were watching every move of the mecha, saw this. Their hearts twitched violently. "Lin boy, what are you doing? Didn't you say you were going to detonate the missile? Why are you still rushing towards the missile?" Zihuan's furious voice sounded, and there was a sound like a broken bellows in his throat. Grunting. It was obvious that the old man was extremely excited. Lin Shen did not respond, but just focused on controlling the machine with a calm face. The speed of the intercontinental missile was already fast, and Lin Shen suddenly slowed down and turned around. 5 kilometers came almost instantly. However, Lin Shen flew upwards a few meters after turning around. The 2 missiles were now completely close. Lin Shen pulled the joystick on the control panel, and with the click of the red button on the other side, the mecha's back thrusters, which had been mostly closed, were directly opened. The huge adhesion even made Lin Shen and Ling Zhen inside the mecha lean back slightly. But at this moment, the mecha's speed, which had almost returned to 0, soared to Mach 4 again. With just a simple pause and turn, Lin Shen had already controlled the mecha to fly 2 kilometers to the side. Then he stretched out his left arm. The flap on the side of his arm popped up, and then a small missile flew out in the direction of the intercontinental missile. Then Lin Shen increased the speed to the extreme, and in just 3 seconds he climbed back to Mach 10. The whole process was done in one go, and even the movements were slightly elegant in the eyes of the viewers. It was like dancing a waltz. The automatic positioning system of the intercontinental missile detected the target deviation and just wanted to turn and track. But the small missile just launched had hit the intercontinental missile. The pressure increase was detected, and with a bang, a group of gorgeous fireworks appeared on the sea, and another intercontinental missile also bloomed directly under the terrifying heat. Endless waves suddenly set off on the originally calm sea surface. However, Lin Shen had already driven the mecha to the outside more than 10 kilometers away to watch. In the Customs and Border Defense Department, almost everyone could clearly see the 2 groups of fireworks that suddenly appeared in the distance on the horizon. Everyone was stunned and numb. Epidemic didn't know what to say. Minister Li, Zihuan, Professor Wang and others exhaled a long breath. They felt their hearts twitch violently and almost suffocated. Zihuan, who was irritable, was almost swearing, which showed that he was indeed extremely excited. Chapter 54. Do you want to go to space? You little bastard, will you die if you don't try extreme operations? You have to let an old man like me be stimulated like this. You are committing a sin. When you come back, I will beat your ass. Zihuan was outbuting like crazy, and everyone's faces suddenly fell into a row of black lines, and they all turned their heads away and didn't see it. Lin Shen, who was in the cockpit, had a dark face when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. After all, they had been in contact for so long, and they all knew that Zihuan had a bad temper. Although he said so, it was basically just talk. Don't worry, this thing is designed by me. Of course I know where its control limit is. Remember the protective shield of Iron Man? There is also one on the mecha, and it is an upgraded version. Even if I am directly hit by a missile, I can't destroy the protective shield at all. After a slight hesitation, Lin Shen decided to tell everyone the truth. Otherwise, what will happen next? He felt that Zihuan might really wait for him to come down and beat him up. At the same time, he was also worried that he would suffocate by scaring these old people. That would be a big deal. Hearing this, everyone nodded slowly. If that's the case, they can be a little relieved. The Iron Man's shield was basically seen by everyone present before. It also directly resisted the existence of anti-aircraft missiles. Although it was not an intercontinental missile, the degree of defense was still terrifying. Moreover, the energy used by the Iron Man armor at that time was not nuclear energy. The energy used by the current mecha is even hydrogen energy converted from nuclear power, and it is the upgraded version that Lin Shen said. It shouldn't be a big deal to use it to resist intercontinental missiles. While thinking this in their hearts, everyone looked up in horror. What were they thinking just now? When did intercontinental missiles become so easily resisted? It seems that Lin Shen created so many miracles that they were directly misled. Any one of them would cause a shocking existence if it was released. The corners of everyone's mouth twitched slightly, and then continued to look at the picture projected by the satellite. Lin Shen was floating in the air at this time, and he had no movement. Clear satellite images showed that the mecha itself was not damaged at all, and even the paint on the surface was not scratched. On Minister Li's side, the entire Air Defense Department was basically in silence. Minister, I suddenly feel that our air defense weapons need to be upgraded. The monitoring team leader looked at the satellite image, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and reminded him. Minister Li turned around and rolled his eyes. We have already used intercontinental missiles as air defense weapons. What else do you want to upgrade to? Except for nuclear weapons, find something more powerful than intercontinental missiles. Minister Li, who had just been stimulated, was obviously very angry. Originally, he couldn't find a target to release, but since the monitoring team leader came to the door himself, he would not be polite. The monitoring team leader was sprayed with saliva all over his face, but he didn't dare to move at all. Just now, his brain was twitching, and he said this subconsciously. Think about it carefully. How stupid this behavior is. At this time, Lin Shen thought about it for a while in the mecha and spoke. Do you want to go to space? After the words fell, the three parties fell into silence. In the cockpit, in the Ice City military base, and in the main control room, everyone stood still, as if they had heard something out of the ordinary. "What did you just say, kid? You want to go to space? Don't tell me your mecha can fly to space." Zihuan's hands had already begun to tremble. If someone could monitor his heart rate at this time, they would definitely be able to see it. His heart rate had already soared to over 230. For an old man, this was even the point of seeing the gates of hell. Go Zian saw that the situation was not right, and hurriedly took out a bottle of quick-acting heart-saving pills from somewhere and stuffed one into Zihuan's mouth. Then he handed over the water cup. After Zihuan drank a sip of water and swallowed the quick-acting heart-saving pill, his trembling body slowly calmed down. Yes, the original intention of the mecha design itself is to cope with any aerial battle. The space station can also be considered an aerial battle. Lin Shen nodded calmly, but everyone who heard this didn't know what to say. What the hell is a space battle also considered an aerial battle? Are you going to fight aliens in space, whose good air force flew to outer space to attack you? Do you think you are an intercontinental missile? Even intercontinental missiles only fly to the near-ground layer and then fly towards the attack site. It hasn't even touched the space yet, and you are already thinking about the battle in space. 10,000 grass mud horses rushed through everyone's hearts. They opened their mouths to say something, but found that they couldn't say anything. Professor Wang has not spoken since he was shocked at the beginning. This is obviously a sign of being too shocked. "If you don't say anything, I will acquiesce," Lin Shen said, and he had already pressed on the virtual screen in front of him. After a while, with the colorful buttons lit up again, the vector thrusters behind the mecha started again. This time it was still a vertical climb mode, but the driver went from a novice to a master. Then the speed of the mecha began to climb wildly. The sonic boom sounded instantly, blowing the surrounding sea level down 2 meters. This time the vertical climb speed almost instantly soared to Mach 3. It was even more terrifying than before. The start was close to the limit speed of the Iron Man armor. How can it be played? However, after experiencing the excitement just now, everyone can now obviously accept the speed of the mecha more. After all, the limit speed just now is there, a full Mach 15. Now it is only Mach 3, which is simply a child's play. At the same time, everyone also watched the screen silently. They all wanted to know whether the mecha could really fly into space, as Lin Shen said. As we all know, the only way for humans to enter space now is through rockets. There is no success in other aspects. If the mecha can still succeed, it may create a new history, and the mecha is definitely more convenient and terrifying than aviation rockets. It can even have combat capabilities. Under the gaze of everyone, Lin Shen flew higher and higher, and soon surpassed the previous limit of altitude, breaking through 10,000 meters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55: Faster Than a Rocket. What kind of monster is this? At the same time, the speed of the mecha continued to rise, and did not stop at Mach 15. Wait, is this thing going faster? Zihuan and Professor Wang obviously saw the situation on the mecha, and their faces were full of horror. Hearing this, everyone involuntarily focused their eyes on the data panel. The number of Mach 15 began to jump continuously, and in just half a minute, it had risen to Mach 17. After another half a minute, it became Mach 20. In the end, the mecha maintained at Mach 23 and rushed into space like a meteor. Almost everyone present had begun to petrify. They just stared at the display in front of them, making a clicking sound when their mouths opened and closed, but they had no idea what to say. What kind of monster is this mecha? I thought Mach 15 was already the limit of this thing, but who could have thought that it could be faster? Maybe Mach 23 is really the limit of the mecha, but who can guarantee it? Didn't they think so just now? Now this slap in the face came so suddenly. If the mecha had been at this speed just now, it would have been able to shake off the tracking of the 2 intercontinental missiles behind it in an instant. Zihuan and Professor Wang looked at the data on the console with complicated expressions. They felt that their 3 views had been overturned. The most important thing is that this mecha is not streamlined. which is completely against aerodynamics. Is this thing really just a decoration? Then what exactly did they follow before? Lin, why don't you just tell me what the fastest speed of this thing is? Zihuan finally couldn't help it. His body, which had finally stopped shaking, began to shake again almost during the new class break. Originally, the Iron Man armor had been developed, and he was confidently preparing to study the mecha through the Iron Man armor. But who could have thought that his idea had just come up, and Lin Shen had even developed the mecha, and the effect had even far exceeded what they could imagine. This is completely a mecha in a science fiction movie. Seeing this, Go Zian could only come over and pat Zihuan on the back to help the old professor calm down. Lin Shen raised his head slightly when he heard this, and then his eyes froze a little. Speaking of speed, I don't seem to know how fast this thing can fly. The main reason is that this is the first time to try it. If you don't mind, maybe I can give it a try. After Lin Shen's voice fell, almost everyone who heard this couldn't hold it anymore. Zihuan and Professor Wang's faces showed a stammer. Listen to what you said. Are you talking? You don't even know what the speed of a mecha is. But this thing has already broken the limit that humans can imagine. You said that this may not be the fastest speed of a mecha. You might as well say that the fastest speed of this mecha can be doubled. Not only Zihuan and Professor Wang were shocked, but Minister Li was already shocked. Some people even thought the sound of the radar was too loud, so they simply turned down the sound of the radar. Their eyes were quietly watching the connected satellite video. The silver-white mecha driven by Lin Shen had even begun to produce burning sparks from friction on its surface. But even so, the paint on the outer layer of the mecha had not fallen off. This was totally unreasonable. At the same time, Lin Shen in the cockpit had indeed begun to adjust the operating mode. As the buttons kept flashing, it could be clearly seen through the satellite images that the surface of the mecha had even begun to deform slightly. However, this was not caused by the huge pressure. This was the slight contraction of the mecha itself. The hull seemed to be slightly shortened, and the air resistance was naturally reduced a lot. Even the vector thrusters on the side had all been moved to spray downwards due to fine-tuning. Then, the speed of the mecha began to soar again. 25 Mach, 27 Mach, 30 Mach. In the next 5 minutes, the maximum speed of the mecha continued to rise. The already numb people didn't know what to say when they saw this. They could only stand there quietly, staring at the data like wooden men. Finally, after another 2 minutes, the speed of the mecha slowly stabilized at a value, and this value was Mach 37. I remember that the speed of the rocket seemed to be only up to Mach 23. Suddenly, someone said this. Everyone was caught off guard and was shocked out of their daze. Then they suddenly widened their eyes. Yes, how could they forget the speed of the rocket? The speed of the rocket must be even faster than that of the intercontinental missile, so that the entire rocket can leave the atmosphere. But now the speed of the mecha has even exceeded that of the rocket. Is this thing really something that can be researched by current technology? Lin, the speed of the mecha should be the limit now. Zihuan spoke weakly, and he was even a little weak. He didn't know what to say to express his shock. Professor Wang on the side looked a little calm, but it was too quiet. Go Zian immediately found something wrong. When he approached, he found that Professor Wang had fainted with his eyes wide. First aid kit, bring it over. Mr. Wang has fainted. Go Zian was shocked by this change, and everyone ran around after hearing this. Fortunately, first aid kits are almost always available in the factory. After a while, someone came with the first aid kit, and after everyone struggled for a while, they finally woke up Professor Wang. Lin Shen obviously didn't know much about the change outside, because his attention was now focused on the operation. No, the speed of the mecha should still be faster. Lin Shen frowned slightly, and then responded. In fact, everyone had already prepared for this, so it was not unacceptable. Then why don't you continue to speed up? Zihuan was slightly stunned, and this time he asked calmly, because the mecha has now left the atmosphere and entered the outer space area, so there is no need to continue to speed up. After Lin Shen's voice fell, everyone subconsciously looked at the picture projected by the satellite. Chapter 56, Testing the Attack Power. Directly blowing up the satellite, I saw a blue planet slowly rotating under the mecha. There was a thin layer of clouds on it, and even the eye of the storm could be seen on the sea in the distance. This should be the typhoon that is about to come. However, this magnificent scene, which could only be seen on TV before, now appeared in front of them through the projected picture. Lin Shen also projected the picture of the cockpit. This picture was even more real than the picture taken by the satellite. The mecha has really come to space. Seeing this scene, almost everyone was a little stunned. They were really scared today. This kind of shock, if it was young people, it would be easier to accept. But basically everyone present was a scientist. They all believed in the existence of science. But the current science could not do this at all. How could they believe it? So far, only the speed test has been carried out. As for the other tests, let's do them here. Lin Shen's voice suddenly came over. Everyone came back to their senses when they heard this, and a trace of doubt flashed in their eyes. Other tests? What other tests are there? Let alone the mecha. Just this data so far is already a very terrifying existence, not to mention putting it on the battlefield. Even if aliens really come, I am afraid that the mecha can successfully defend it. Moreover, hasn't the power of the missile been tested before? Although it is just to detonate an intercontinental missile, as long as the contents are replaced with a more powerful missile, there will be no problem at all. The other capabilities of the mecha, as well as the attack and defense capabilities, have not been tested yet. Let's test the attack capability first. It happens that the terrain is open here. You can show everyone the effect then. It's just this small piece of space junk in front. Lin Shen drove the mecha around, and his eyes suddenly fell on a piece of space scrap metal that was drifting in front. According to radar detection, the current piece of space scrap metal is still 10 kilometers away from the position of the mecha. Lin Shen did not operate too much this time, but just patted the operating table next to him. Suddenly, a joystick rose up on the side. Looking at this joystick, this kind of person suddenly felt that it seemed like a handle in a game. Although they are not exactly the same, it must be said that this thing is very similar. Then, Lin Shen gently clicked the yellow button on the virtual screen. The mecha mode has been changed, and the long-range attack mode is turned on. With the sound of the mechanical sound, in the satellite image, the things that were originally like wings on the side of the mecha unfolded. Then they slowly extended forward and turned into two shoulder cannons erected on the shoulders of the mecha. Seeing this, everyone's eyes widened again. It seems that this thing is not a separation of air power, but a weapon. No one could have thought of this. They thought that the mecha's means of attack should be just the missiles fired from its arms just now. If you look at the size of the missiles, the mecha can store dozens of such missiles. It is already very terrifying on the battlefield. It is simply like a war machine. What's more important is not this point, but these two shoulder cannons do not seem to use missiles as weapons. While everyone was confused, another mechanical sound rang out. The current target has been locked, and the shoulder gun begins to charge. Charging is complete, ready to fire at any time. At the same time, gently pressed the button on the joystick. Then two groups of light blue light began to converge, and 2 seconds later, two blue beams of light bloomed instantly. Just for a moment, the space scrap metal 10 kilometers away had begun to explode. After the blue light, the space scrap metal had been blown away without even a speck of dust left. Silence. Deathly silence. At this moment, everyone's pupils had begun to shrink. They stared at the screen blankly, still wondering whether this was real or a science fiction movie. After a moment, another explosion suddenly appeared in the distance. At this time, everyone looked up in confusion and looked at the screen. Didn't something explode just now? What did it explode this time? No, this thing only happened once. Why are there two explosions? While everyone was looking at each other, they had already looked at the satellite projection screen. Not far away, it seemed that countless metal fragments were flying everywhere. And there, it seemed to be the sky above Eagle Sauce. Suddenly, Zihuan seemed to have thought of something, and his face froze. If I remember correctly, that should be one of the Eagle Sauce's satellite chains. Could it be that the two lasers just now penetrated the space scraps and hit the satellite chain? As soon as this was said, everyone opened their mouths wide, and their eyeballs dropped to the ground. You can tell how shocked they were without even looking. They didn't even look at it in their field of vision just now, but because of the explosion, the satellite screen switched. It was because of this that they could see that the satellite chain was more than 40 kilometers away from the mecha. At such a distance, it could still be hit. How far is the attack range? Not to mention that the laser had hit the space scraps and penetrated through it before hitting the satellite chain. But suddenly, this kind of person felt as if he felt comfortable. Didn't the Eagle Sauce before think that his technology was very powerful? No matter what he had, he would show off. Even the training was the same. It was many times more advanced than the technology of other countries. But now that one of them has been shot down, the entire satellite chain has been broken. It will take at least 2 or 3 years to build another one. More importantly, those guys in the Eagle Sauce will never figure out who did it. Even if they see this mecha, they can't even associate it. This is totally free. Mr. Lee was also slightly stunned at first, but then he burst into laughter. Obviously, he also thought of this. Lin Shen, who was sitting inside the mecha, saw the explosion in the satellite chain in the distance, and his mouth twitched slightly. Sorry, I didn't notice that there are other things behind the spaceship. Since the attack has been tested, let's test the defense next. Lin Shen felt a little guilty. He could naturally see that the satellite chain in the distance was a satellite chain, and it was not theirs. Now that they have done something bad, they naturally have to leave quickly, otherwise, it would be bad if they were caught in the act. Chapter 57 Defense Test, Smashing the Meteorite. As Lin Shen said this, he quickly drove the mecha towards the hospital, and in that direction, in everyone's view, was the moon. Wait, aren't you going to conduct a defense test? Why are you going to the moon? Zihuan saw this scene and quickly recovered from his shock. The others reacted and looked at the projection screen, and found that Lin Shen was indeed flying towards the moon at an extremely terrifying speed. Of course it's to test the defense capability. If it's too close, it may affect the people below. Lin Shen pointed in the direction of the Earth while operating the mecha, and Zihuan and others were speechless. Take it easy, kid. We agreed to test the defense. What are you going to test that can affect the entire Earth? Even Professor Wang couldn't help but speak. He just recovered and really couldn't bear any more big blows. Just now, a satellite of Eagle Sauce was blown up, and it must be said that everyone present was secretly happy. But it was definitely not allowed to be said openly, so they could only cough and pretend that they didn't see it, and they would be happy in their hearts. Next, Lin Shen said that he would test the defense capability, but the hearts of the people who had just let go were hanging again. It seemed that since he started driving the mecha, every time Lin Shen said that there was something going on, it must be no small matter. In this way, such people can basically predict what kind of shocking things are. Lin Shen just nodded slightly without responding, and was still madly increasing his speed to fly away. After a while, his speed had increased to the peak just now, and even exceeded it. Now it has reached the terrifying 40 Mach. Everyone seemed to have been numb to the speed for a long time, and they didn't know what language to use to describe their feelings. Anyway, even if the mecha was opened at 60 Mach, Zihuan and Professor Wang only felt that it seemed normal. After all, this mecha is the only one in the world, and it may even exist in science fiction movies. Found it. It's this thing. After flying forwards for more than 10 minutes, Lin Shen saw a meteorite in front of him that was slightly larger than the mecha. At this time, it was quietly suspended in space without any movement. At this point, everyone still had a lot of doubt in their eyes when they saw the meteorite. They had no idea what Lin Shen was looking for the meteorite for. After all, wasn't it agreed to test the defense capabilities? This meteorite won't attack, so why are you looking for it? However, the next second, Lin Shen was already driving the mecha and continued to rush towards the direction of the meteorite at a very fast speed. Almost everyone was shocked by his action. You know, the mecha Lin Shen was driving was speeding at a speed of 40 Mach. If it really hit something, wouldn't it be a point where the machine was destroyed and everyone died? Are you crazy? Stop it quickly. Zihuan slammed the table, and his thunderous voice had long been unbearable. Don't worry, old Z. Isn't this to test the defense capabilities of the mecha? Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Lin Shen responded without looking back, and then during the operation, he could see that a thin layer of light film seemed to appear on the outer layer of the mecha. It was the same as the Iron Man armor in the previous defense process. This is the upgraded defense capability mentioned earlier. The energy used by this thing is the same hydrogen energy as the energy used by the mecha now, and this defense function is naturally many times better than Iron Man's armor. However, at this moment, no one can calmly look at the situation in front of them, because of the maximum speed of 40 Mach. If it hits the meteorite at such a speed, the power caused is not much worse than a direct hit by an intercontinental missile. It is even more powerful. Now it is just a test, and it is not time to risk your life. But now it is too late to continue shouting. Lin Shen has already driven the mecha to hit the meteorite fiercely. With a bang, everyone subconsciously clenched their fists. Zihuan, Minister Li, Old Man Zuo and Professor Wang, the four of them, couldn't help but lean forward slightly. One by one, they almost wanted to stick their eyes to the screen. And the next second, the meteorite in front of them actually broke directly with a click. Everyone's mouth was already open as wide as possible, and Minister Li's pupils had even shrunk to the extreme. He felt that his mind had collapsed. Crack, another sound was heard, but this time it was not the meteorite breaking, but Minister Li's jaw was dislocated. The monitoring team leader saw this scene and ran over to grab Minister Li's jaw and lifted it up. There was another crack, and Minister Li was in so much pain that tears almost fell. But fortunately the dislocation recovered in time, and the pain was only a moment away. Hiss, I want this mecha. No, I must apply to the higher-ups. As soon as he recovered, Minister Li slammed the table hard, his eyes still staring at the mecha in front of him. On the other side, Zihuan and the others only felt dizzy, and their brains were even a little short of oxygen. Fortunately, the first aid kit had just been brought over, and Gozian took out an oxygen tube for each of the three elderly people and stuffed it into their noses. After taking 2 breaths, the symptoms of the 3 elderly people were alleviated. It was directly smashed. Professor Wang grabbed his hair like a chicken coop, his face full of madness. Zihuan just watched silently, without responding immediately, or he didn't know what to say at all. What can be said? A meteorite larger than the mecha was smashed directly by the terrifying force. Under such circumstances, the mecha didn't even have any damage to the thin film of defense. This is no longer a question of defense. This is a complete crushing of defense. The two sides are not at the same level at all. This defense. No wonder Lin Kid didn't get any damage even if he took on an intercontinental missile before. What kind of monster did this kid research? After a long while, Zihuan spoke, but the words he said were a little weak. He suddenly felt that his lifelong research had been completely overturned today. There is no comparison at all. What is there to compare? They can even retire and wait. Let's not talk about other things. If the Iron Man armor and mecha can be fully understood, then what else can't be made? Just relying on these two, China can already be the world's top technological power. Not to mention that China currently has controlled nuclear fusion. Compared with these, the full-body exoskeleton armor is not even qualified to compare. Chapter 58. One small step for mankind, one giant leap for mecha. How is it? Is this defense performance okay? Lin Shen looked at the connected screen with a smile. When he found that these people were standing still, he could only smile helplessly. Lin Shen, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat, came back to his senses now. There was no fear in his eyes, but only a strong excitement. This was really exciting and unexpected. Lin Shen had even thought about coming here to experience the feeling of operating a mecha, but he never thought that this thing could fly. And until now, it is completely a real mecha. How could a science fiction fan like Lin Shen resist such temptation? If it weren't for his substandard operation, Lin Shen even wanted to try operating it himself, so he could only look at Lin Shen with excitement, and even with a proud look in his eyes, because whether it is a full-body exoskeleton armor, an Iron Man armor, or controlled nuclear fusion and mecha, they were all invented by her boyfriend Lin Shen. And in addition to this mecha and controlled nuclear fusion, she herself also participated in it. Therefore, he also had a great sense of achievement. I suddenly felt that in the future, perhaps there would be a special program for mecha driving licenses. I don't know about other countries, but I think China should be not far from that day. Lin Shen was already immersed in fantasy. But it must be said that such an idea does seem to have such a possibility of realization, even if it cannot be popularized. If it is only used in the military, then I can definitely use it. And driving a mecha is actually not much different from driving a fighter. Zihuan, Professor Wang, and even Minister Li, who heard this, have already begun to think about it. I don't think it's that troublesome. This thing is intelligent, even if you don't learn it. It's more than enough for ground combat and air combat if it's a single product instruction. The real master operation skills that you have to learn will only be used after entering outer space. The others are just icing on the cake. Anyway, except for nuclear weapons, I don't think anything can threaten this mecha. Lin Shen smiled and shook his head. When the others heard this, the thoughts they had just had in their minds disappeared. Yes, why should they consider these complicated operations? They are not going to space, so it is useless to think about these things. As for fighting on the ground, or flying, etc., just like Lin Shen did before, it is completely possible to do this directly through voice intelligent control. So there is no need to do these things at all. While talking, the mecha driven by Lin Shen and his team was getting closer and closer to the direction of the moon. It was not until then that everyone realized that Lin Shen had completed the defense test, but had not stopped. Lin, you are not really going to the moon to take a look? Zihuan and the others were shocked. One by one, they hurriedly asked, since we are here, it is definitely unreasonable not to take a look at the moon, and we will reach the moon in about 5 minutes at most, so why not go and take a look? Lin Shen said, and everyone's face suddenly darkened. They are really pure Chinese people. No matter what time, they always adhere to the principle of since we are here, we will go. There is no one else. But if you really say so, if anyone is at such a distance, I am afraid that everyone will be unable to resist. Thinking of this, Zihuan and the others could understand. Is there enough oxygen in the mecha? In fact, the oxygen problem was one of the other reasons that everyone was worried about, because they had just been in space for more than 20 minutes. The space inside the mecha was only this big. How much oxygen could it hold? Don't worry, there is an oxygen generator inside the mecha, which can completely decompose oxygen through hydrogen energy converted from nuclear energy. As long as the mecha's energy is still there, there will be no lack of oxygen in the mecha. As for energy, everyone doesn't have to worry about excessive consumption. So far, the energy consumed is only about 1/20th of the mecha itself. Not to mention there is backup energy. A simple estimate is that the mecha can travel back and forth between the Earth and the Moon dozens of times without any problem after it is fully charged with energy. Lin Shen made a simple calculation and told everyone an extremely shocking fact. Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. The distance between the Earth and the Moon is 380,000 kilometers. Such a long distance, even a rocket will take a long time to fly. In just half an hour, the mecha had basically approached the distance of the Moon, and could even go back and forth dozens of times. Do you think this is something that people can say? Fortunately, this is indeed understandable. After all, it is an energy source of controlled nuclear fusion. What's wrong with being a little longer? Is there a problem? No problem at all. Soon, a few minutes later, the speed of the mecha had slowed down, and it soon landed in the direction of the Moon. After a burst of smoke and dust, the mecha had successfully landed on the surface of the Moon. As in the popular science video, the surface of the Moon is indeed bumpy and covered with craters one after another. At the same time, there are even some traces of human activities here. I don't know which country's astronauts left behind these traces, but now with the landing of the mecha, these traces are soon covered by smoke and dust. Lin Shen has already driven the mecha forward. Since we are on the Moon, there is naturally no need to fly. Let's take a look around here slowly. Moreover, the mecha jumps step by step, and the speed of walking on the Moon is even faster than that of the Moon landing vehicle. After a while, Lin Shen suddenly saw a sign on the side. Through the electronic searchlight equipment, it can be seen that it says the first step of mankind. Lin Shen was stunned for a moment, and then he seemed to think of something and quickly controlled the mecha to lift his foot. Now on the ground, except for the footprint of a mecha, The first footprint representing the first human landing on the moon has disappeared. And now everyone watching this scene is covering their faces with their mouths twitching slightly. How could they not think of what Lin Shen can think of? But now that the footprints have disappeared, it is naturally impossible to restore them. Moreover, the first step of the mecha on the moon is also a commemorative significance for mankind. What's more, this is done by them in China, so just pretend you don't know. Chapter 59. There are aliens in space. Mom, I want to go back to Earth. After leaving a footprint on the moon, Lin Shen simply drove the mecha away. Anyway, now that he had seen it, there was really nothing to see on the moon, so he could go back now. The speed of returning was still very fast. In just half an hour, the mecha had returned to the position where it had taken off before, slowly reducing its speed. Next, it had to return to the atmosphere, and the speed of the mecha naturally could not continue to increase. When landing, there was the blessing of gravity. If the speed was too fast, even with the isolation of the mecha, the yin force inside the mecha would still be huge. Lin Shen and Ling Zhi simply could not withstand such a huge impact and pressure. Therefore, the speed of falling could only reach about 4-5 Mach at most. If it was faster, perhaps they would have fainted before they landed. When the mecha once again turned into a silver-white light and disappeared in the atmosphere. In the space station in the distance, two people were quietly staring at the position where the mecha fell. Jace, did you see anything just now? I saw a silver-white mecha. What about you? You didn't see it too, did you, Mark? Mark nodded blankly. After such confirmation, he could realize that he was not dreaming. All this was real. So, what they saw just now was indeed a mecha. Originally, the two of them were working in the space station, but just now, they detected that a satellite in their Eagle Sauce's satellite chain was suddenly destroyed. The two were sent out to investigate the situation. They were still searching around, but for more than half an hour, they didn't find anything. Until just when they were about to withdraw the team and go back, they suddenly found the returning mecha. The two were almost stunned in an instant. They didn't expect that there would be such a thing as a mecha in this world. And more importantly, the destination of this mecha is actually the Earth. The only thing that Jace and Mark can be sure of now is that with the technology of any country on Earth, it is impossible to manufacture a mecha. What a joke. Even their Eagle Sauce, as the world's #1 technological power, can't make such a mecha. Why do other countries have the right? So this mecha should come from outer space. In this case, doesn't it mean that aliens are going to invade the Earth? Thinking of this, the faces of the two people became stiff again. They looked at each other with a look of horror. Shit, the previous satellite must have been blown up by this thing. No, I must report this matter. Mom is too scary. Aliens are going to invade the Earth. No, I want to apply to return to Earth. Space is too dangerous. There are actually aliens, the two exclaimed, and then quickly rushed into the interior of the space station. Their exclamations still echoed in the empty corridor. In the hexagon building of Eagle Sauce, a table of people was gathered around a round table at this time, and there was also information just reported from the space station. It is said that their satellite was blown up by a silver-white mecha. What a joke. 3-star Admiral Paul Wade slammed the table hard, his eyes full of anger. Mecha? Who reported the mecha to me? How could there be aliens in this world? It's ridiculous. NASA, you must give me an explanation today. Can anyone really go to space and become an astronaut? Paul Wade pointed the finger at NASA. It was obvious that he believed that the two astronauts had mental problems. Otherwise, how could the well-known things come out of the mouths of the two astronauts? Obviously, this is nonsense. The people of NASA didn't know what to say when faced with this. Obviously, they never thought that their astronauts would say such a ridiculous thing, so they had to eat such a dumb loss. Investigate. You must investigate for me. I want to know who blew up the satellite within 3 days. Do you really think that we, the Eagle Sauce, have not started a war for so many years and are no longer the world's #1 power? Let me know who did it, and you must fight back for me. In the empty conference room, the roar of the 3-star general is now constantly recalled. On the other side, Lin Shen was driving a mecha to land from above the Ice City. Inside the Air Defense Department of the military base, The alarm sounded again, but it was turned off after only 2 sounds, because Minister Li and his team could see through the satellite image that the object flying down at Mach 4 was not a missile but a mecha. It was just because there was no chip that could directly enter China, so it was ringing wildly. Even if the same fluctuation was just detected, it was still the same. Seeing this, Minister Li was no longer prepared to continue watching. You guys watch here for me. If there is any similar situation again, don't activate the air defense system. Only send this to me after confirming those missiles. Otherwise, if there is a third similar situation, you will not have to work as a captain. Before leaving, Minister Li glared at the previous monitoring captain. The captain was looking bitter at this time. How could he know what the situation was? The first Iron Man armor was fine, and the speed could even be explained a little. The second mecha was almost as fast as an intercontinental missile. Under normal circumstances, no one could have thought of this situation. I would rather guess that it was a missile than wait until it was confirmed and then it would be too late to react. However, this happened twice in a row. Not only him, but even Minister Li had to be told by the higher-ups. So, he had to bite the bullet and swallow this. Minister Li, who had left the military base, naturally drove to find Zihuan and the others. Last time, the chief was there, and the matter of the Iron Man armor was directly rejected. Minister Li was helpless about this, but this time, the chief was not there, so he must be ready to try it again. And this is a mecha. If you can really get one, wouldn't it be countless times better than the Iron Man armor? Compared with the mecha, the Iron Man armor is simply weak. There is no comparison between the two. Thinking of this, Minister Li even walked a little faster, almost jogging. At this time, in the factory area of Lin Shen, the mecha slowly hovered at a position of about 10 meters, and then slowly fell. Chapter 60. If you keep talking nonsense, I will sew your mouth shut. The huge pressure even made the windows of the entire factory area tremble wildly. Fortunately, the area around here has basically been modified, so there was no big problem in the end. When the mecha landed completely on the ground, everyone held their breath fiercely. Almost everyone's eyes were fixed on the mecha in front of them. They felt their eyeballs were congested. If they continued to be stimulated like this, they were afraid that their eyes would burst. The upper and lower front teeth were hitting each other fiercely, making a crackling sound. It seemed that they wanted to speak, but they couldn't say anything. Obviously, in just a few hours, the mecha gave them too much stimulation. This is even more exciting than the Iron Man armor. After all, they participated in the production of the Iron Man armor, so they naturally have some ideas in their minds. And they also know roughly how powerful the Iron Man armor is. But this mecha is obviously a sudden blow. Who would have thought that in just 1 month, Lin Shen had already made something like a mecha? And this thing is not even a semi-finished product. It is the kind that has been completely completed. Zihuan and the others hurried over and were about to come to the side of the mecha to take a look. Don't come over yet. Lin Shen's voice quickly came from the mecha. Zihuan's eyes immediately glared, and his temper could no longer be suppressed. You kid, the mecha you developed is like a treasure. Let me, an old man, see what's wrong? Hearing this, Lin Shen suddenly became helpless. Old Z, it's not a treasure at all. If you come over now, the temperature of the outer layer of the mecha will make you lose a layer of skin. As soon as these words came out, everyone suddenly reacted. According to the data just seen, the surface temperature of the mecha has reached at least 400 degrees. This is the speed of breaking through the atmosphere at only 5 times the speed of sound. If they were so close just now, maybe they really would lose a layer of skin, as Lin Shen said. Zihuan could only step back a few steps in disappointment. Okay, that's fine. You stay inside too. Wait until the temperature drops before you come out. Go Zian. Go get someone to test the data on this thing right now. Zihuan waved his hand. Go Zian agreed and turned away. After a while, Go Zian came back, but there was still a hint of helplessness on his face. The closest person now is Huang Mingwei, who just came back from studying abroad. Hearing this, everyone present was slightly stunned, and then there was a little strange look on their faces. Everyone present knew Huang Mingwei. This guy came back from studying abroad in Eagle Sauce in the past 2 years. But this guy didn't give people a good impression, because he was more of a traitor. Basically, He would compare China with eagle sauce in everything, so he was basically the least popular one in the base. But now there is no other way. It seems that he can only let this guy come. Everyone's face was not so good, and it was obvious that they were very unhappy with that guy. But since there is no other way now, let this guy try. According to Zihuan and Old Man Zuo's temper, no matter how much this guy betrayed his own people, he would definitely be scolded in the end. Anyway, all they wanted was the experimental data. After all, this is a mecha. If some data can be detected, it is enough to prove that this thing can indeed be made by humans. It's not that they don't believe it, but it's too shocking. Obviously, this thing is not something that can appear under normal circumstances, and the detection of this experimental data can indeed prepare them for the next experiment. After all, this mecha cannot be made in just one set. If the effect can be confirmed and it can be mass-produced, then the mecha may replace most modern weapons to a greater extent and become the mainstream in the future. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, the outer layer of the mecha gradually cooled down and returned to normal temperature. However, at this time, Huang Mingwei also walked over arrogantly holding something like a big box. What kind of work can I do, and come to such a remote factory? Even the laboratory can't find anything useful. How can this factory find something more powerful than the laboratory? Huang Mingwei looked around with a strong disdain in his eyes. The disgusting voice came before the person arrived. Everyone couldn't help but frown, and there was obvious disgust in their eyes. This is why they don't want to find this guy. Whatever he does, his eyes are almost raised to the top of his head. Fortunately, he is in civilized China. If he was outside, he would have been beaten to a pulp. If you ask me, you are just too stubborn. If we Chinese had learned from the eagle sauce a long time ago, how could our technology be so backward? It is obvious that they are more advanced. This point has to be admitted. No wonder the level of technology has not improved. Just after entering the door of this factory, the disgusting voice sounded again. The two sentences that followed made almost everyone present look gloomy. Huang Mingwei, don't worry about whether you can use your mouth or not. If you say one more word of bullshit, I'll sew your mouth shut. Let's see if I dare to do it today. The hot-tempered Zihuan roared, and Huang Mingwei, who had just walked in, shrank his head when he heard Zihuan's voice. But even so, his eyes still didn't change. But he really didn't dare to say anything. Obviously, he was very afraid of Zihuan, an old man with a bad temper. And Zihuan was really not just talking. When they first met, Huang Mingwei was very arrogant even when he saw Zihuan. However, the final result was that this guy was directly hit with 2 big slaps. You also reported this matter to the higher-ups, but the higher-ups still ignored it. Even any of his reactions were directly rejected. From then on, this guy seemed to have learned his lesson. Although he said it, he was very restrained in front of Zihuan. Seeing that the other party had restrained himself, Zihuan glared and pointed at the mecha and spoke. Come here quickly and test this thing. Chapter 61. Throw him out. Huang Mingwei didn't dare to say a word, and could only walk over with the box in his hand. Although there was a strong dissatisfaction in this guy's eyes, it was obvious that no one wanted to pay attention to him. As long as this guy could concentrate on completing what he should do, no one wanted to pay attention to him. As the instrument was connected, the data detection began to fluctuate continuously. After a while, the picture on the instrument appeared. Material detection failed. Unable to distinguish material specifications. Loss detection failed. Unable to distinguish material specifications. These 2 simple lines of words made everyone stand still. What's going on? Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned, and Zihuan even muttered to himself, detection failure. It's impossible. This instrument is obviously the most advanced instrument in China so far. Professor Wang and the others also frowned, and didn't know what to say to describe their feelings at this time. Only Huang Mingwei, not only did not show surprise in his eyes, but also revealed a trace of pleasure. I'll tell you, our technology is not as good as that of the United States. It's already this late, and we can't even detect a toy. And such a big toy, wasting so much material, is an insult to science. As he spoke, the guy raised his head with a haughty attitude. But at this time, No one paid attention to this guy who worshipped foreign things. They all saw with their own eyes that the mecha flew back after a circle, and even intercontinental missiles couldn't do anything to this mecha. It even directly crashed into a meteorite. If you say this thing is still fake, then maybe the world they live in is also fake. Huang Mingwei saw that no one paid attention to him, so he didn't make fun of him here, and turned around to leave. But not long after he left, the guy came back again, and I don't know what happened. He was holding a light green box in his hand. Oh, I suddenly remembered that I still have a set of detectors from the United States. Let me show you how powerful the detectors from the United States are. Without waiting for the others to respond, he came to the side of the mecha first and connected the detector to the leg of the mecha. With the sound of beeps flashing by, data appeared on the screen of the detector again. Material detection failed. Unable to distinguish material properties. Material density detection, 400. Material limit value detection, 100. Looking at the data on the instrument, Huang Mingwei was completely stunned this time. He didn't even dare to rub his eyes confidently, opened his mouth to say something, but didn't say it, because he didn't even know what he was going to say now. What else can he say? This is the detection instrument of Eagle Sauce, and it is also the most advanced detection instrument of Eagle Sauce. The data that can be detected is indeed more novel than that of China. However, it is only a little new. In terms of materials, it is still impossible to detect. What shocked everyone even more was the data in the following two lines. This is the key to this test. What does the density detection of 400 mean? You must know that the density of diamond, the hardest ore in the world, is only 53. At the same time, the density of the hardest artificial synthetic material in the world is only 66. But the density of this thing is as high as 400. Is this still something that can be done by the technology on Earth? It is totally impossible. In addition, there is also a display of the material limit value. This part is even more shocking. It is called the detection of the limit value, but in fact, it is also the proportion of the material that can be used. It is well known that no matter what you make, you will have some losses, and the same is true for materials. Synthetic materials always have materials that cannot be 100% integrated, and some of the advantages of the materials themselves are wasted, but this part of the materials disagrees, and the utilization rate detected is 100%. That is to say, these materials are either completely unfused and are a single type of material, or the two materials are really harmoniously integrated without any connection. However, if there is such a single test material, I am afraid that someone in the world has already found it. Why do we need to wait until now? But if it is a synthesized material, it will be so shocking. The rest of the people who were still thinking, seeing Huang Mingwei standing there, also came over one after another. They did not look at Huang Mingwei, who was in a daze, but looked at the instrument in front of them. But when they looked at the instrument, their faces also froze slightly. Then their eyes were full of disbelief. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Even if it's the Eagle Sauce, it's impossible to research this kind of material. How could China, with such a low level of technology, research it? This must be fake. It must be a trick you used to tease me. You guys look down on me. It must be you who did it. Huang Mingwei's face was ferocious, and his eyes were glaring at everyone present. But now everyone looked at him with a strong disdain in their eyes. A dog like you who can only wag its tail, I think it's more suitable to stay in your Eagle Sauce. Hurry up and wag your tail and go back to stew the licking dog. Don't pollute the air here. Growing up eating China's food, I think your conscience has been eaten by the Eagle Sauce dog. Everyone condemned it, but they spent most of their thoughts on science, and only a small part of them were in life. So they couldn't imagine more vicious words to describe Huang Mingwei. Zihuan and Professor Wang ignored this guy. They were still in shock of the material. As experts in the field of machinery, they naturally understood what these two values meant. This means that the material of the mecha is indeed better than they imagined. Moreover, even if such material is not used to make mecha but used to make other things, it is definitely top-notch. In this way, the entire Chinese material science technology will be upgraded by several levels in an instant. It must be said that they really picked up a treasure this time. Throw him out for me. I will be responsible for anything that happens. Can't the mecha fly? Lin boy, send him back to Yingjian for me. Just as this person was thinking, a rough roar came from outside the door. Everyone looked up and saw that the person who came was Minister Li, who came in a hurry. Zihuan and Professor Wang came back to their senses and stared at Minister Li in a daze. They didn't expect that this guy would come so quickly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62. Be a good person and send him back to his owner. The mecha data connection is successful and can be started at any time. As soon as Minister Li finished speaking, Lin Shen had already started the mecha. Just now in the mecha, he had already felt that this guy looked very unpleasant. After all, these guys who worship foreign things should be left alone like dogs. But without anyone saying anything, he could only be angry in his heart. After all, this guy is still a scientist who has returned from studying abroad in China. If he really does something to him, it will be difficult to explain to the higher-ups. But now that Minister Li has said that he will cover this matter, there is nothing to say. Lin Shen started the mecha instantly, and then reached out and grabbed this guy in his hand. After the mecha's huge palm grabbed him, Huang Mingwei was left with only his head exposed. His face was filled with deep fear and disbelief. He never thought that the mecha would actually move. It seems that this thing is real. Could it be that his data cannot be detected at all? But if it is real, why didn't these guys say it earlier? At this moment, he clearly felt a smell of death approaching him. I can't let it go. What are you going to do? I am still a scientist in China. You are committing murder. Oh, it hurts. Let me go. Huang Mingwei struggled hard, but how could he possibly struggle against the mecha? Lin Shen directly opened the protective shield, and then his body soared into the sky. The entire surface of the mecha was instantly covered by the protective shield, and the vertical climbing speed once again reached Mach 3. It didn't take long before it reached an altitude of 10,000 meters. With the protection of the protective shield, the entire mecha has been isolated from the friction with the air, so the temperature of the surface of the mecha no longer increases. Huang Mingwei is even less susceptible to the power of any wind. Lin Shen did this on purpose. Otherwise, with just such a wave of vertical climbing, the guy in his hand would have died long ago, and he just wanted to send this traitor back to his master's doorstep. As for whether he can survive at the doorstep, it depends on his own luck. After reaching an altitude of 10,000 meters, it adjusted its flight attitude and then quickly left China's airspace. This time, Minister Li had already given instructions, so no base in any city had any reaction. Otherwise, there would be another round of intercontinental missiles chasing and killing. More than half an hour later, Lin Shen landed in a primitive jungle. According to the map, he could see that he had now arrived at a remote area at the doorstep of Yingjian's home. This happened to be a primitive jungle. Don't you like your master Yingjian? In this case, see if your master will come to save you here. The mecha stopped on a rock tens of meters high, put down the guy in his hand who was scared out of his wits, and then turned around and left again. Huang Mingwei was stunned for a long time before he looked around. At this time, his feet were uncomfortable and he couldn't stand up at all. He didn't believe that the scene just now was real, but that was what he experienced personally. So he quickly took out his mobile phone, turned on the positioning function to check, and found that he had really arrived at the doorstep of Yingjian's home. When returning, Lin Shen rushed directly out of outer space, which was also just to take a shortcut. He naturally did not dare to do so before. Otherwise, even with the protection of the protective shield, Huang Mingwei would definitely die. Since there is nothing to worry about now, why did he come so quickly? When they returned to the factory, half an hour had passed. This time, as soon as the mecha stopped, Lin Shen and Ling Zhen walked out of the mecha. With the protection of the protective shield, the mecha as a whole had almost no friction with the air, so the temperature was still at a normal level. We have sent that guy back to the North American wilderness. As for whether this guy can walk back, I don't know. Lin Shen saw the people with expectant faces at the first time, so he also knew what the Saitama people wanted to ask, so he smiled slightly and responded. Hearing this, almost everyone showed a sincere smile on their faces. After all, it is a peaceful era now, and they naturally cannot fight and kill at every turn. But they didn't fight and kill. Instead they acted like good guys and sent the person back to the master. How nice. But if the person can't survive, then it can't be blamed on others, right? It seems that in a place in the North American wilderness, even pythons can grow to more than 10 meters thick. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe Huang Mingwei will experience it soon. After a while of excitement, Minister Li coughed slightly, attracting everyone's attention. Old Z, Old Wang, and Lin, this mecha, Minister Li said, with a smile on his face, and even rubbed his hands like a money grubber. Everyone's face immediately darkened. Just now when there was nothing to do, they called Lin Ziazi, but now they have something to ask for, and they immediately become Lin. Moreover, this is not even a hidden intention, it's like it's written on their faces. But the two old men were so bitter in their hearts, they even just learned about this matter today. What's more, it's not easy for them to decide on such an important thing as a mecha. Even if the chief came, he could only report to the higher-ups. Now that Minister Li was talking about the mecha, they could not say anything even if they wanted to. Minister Li, please don't make things difficult for us. This matter itself is not something we can decide, and Lao Wang and I only found out about it today. This bastard has secretly researched and completed the mecha in a month, and he actually kept us in the dark, Zihuan said, rolling his eyes in anger. When the others heard this, the corners of their mouths twitched. You can secretly research a mecha in a month, so you should be happy. Now you are actually disgusted, although it seems so on the surface. In fact, Zihuan's heart, I am afraid he has already laughed out loud. Minister Li nodded to show his understanding. In fact, he also knew that this matter was of great importance and it was not up to him alone, and he also did not fantasize about getting such a mecha in his heart. Actually, I didn't come here to get a mecha this time, I just wanted to borrow it. Chapter 63 Preparation for the Exercise. Approval of the Iron Man armor, Minister Li said with a helpless look on his face. In a few days, the exercise arranged by the superiors will be held, but the other group of bastards, relying on their more advanced exoskeleton armor, always crush our team. If we are crushed this year, it will be the third consecutive loss, and the supplies our team can obtain will be greatly reduced. At this point, Minister Li began to feel a little indignant. After hearing this, everyone suddenly realized that it was no wonder that Minister Li first set his sights on the Iron Man armor, and now Messi is thinking about the mecha again. It feels like it is because of the exercise. However, after losing for 2 consecutive years, if we lose another year, it would be a bit miserable. So if we want to win a wave, there is nothing wrong. In fact, if you really want to say that, the full-body exoskeleton armor can meet this condition. Professor Wang frowned and suddenly said so. Minister Li heard this and nodded. Full-body exoskeleton armor can indeed meet this requirement, but I am really unhappy after being suppressed for 2 years. Those bastards are too arrogant. They always shout in my ear every year when they win. So since we want to win this time, we have to win beautifully. After saying that, Minister Li rubbed his hands with a wretched look on his face. Everyone's face suddenly darkened. Although they could understand Minister Li's frustration, it was a bit too much to just take out the mecha and go to the other side. Minister Li, we really can't make the decision on this matter. If you really want to apply, you have to see it from above. Otherwise, if it is exposed in advance, we will also be responsible. Zihuan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Even with his violent temper, he couldn't do anything to Minister Li. You also know that your team has been crushed for 2 consecutive years? It seems that you still have some shame. Just when both sides were in a dilemma, a cold snort sounded at the door. Everyone looked out and saw that the leader who appeared when testing the Iron Man armor before had arrived at the door without knowing when. No one was surprised by the appearance of the chief. After all, he is an official figure, basically standing at the pinnacle of power. If you want to find them, just send someone to search and you will know where they are now. Minister Li looked at the chief, and could only show an embarrassed expression on his face. Although he was annoyed, he had no place to vent his anger. As the saying goes, a higher-ranking official can crush a person, and this is not a joke. Hee. So why don't you just approve it directly? As long as there is this mecha, those bastards will be scared silly without having to do anything. As he spoke, the expression on Minister Li's face could hardly be hidden. When everyone saw this scene, they all rolled their eyes. As long as there is this mecha, let alone the strength of the opposing team, even if you are 10 battalions, there is no way. It is impossible to stop the mecha twice. The chief shook his head. Forget about the mecha, not to mention the higher-ups. Even I can't approve it for you, but you can consider the Iron Man armor. Originally, the Iron Man armor was impossible to give you, but with the appearance of the new mecha, the higher-ups have focused on the mecha. So you understand. When the chief said this, Minister Li was slightly stunned, and then his expression suddenly became happy. He had already made plans in his mind, and this time he would end up running empty-handed again, especially when the chief came. But he never thought that although the mecha was not obtained, the Iron Man armor was approved. Although there is a high probability that only one can be used by them, Minister Li is almost aware of the test of the Iron Man armor. It can even withstand the power of an anti-aircraft missile. With this thing, no matter how many exoskeleton armors the opponent has, what can it do? One Iron Man armor is enough to completely sweep the opponent. What's more, they have exoskeleton armor. The current full-body exoskeleton armor has been approved for full-scale manufacturing. Although it has not been long, there are at least hundreds of sets of collections. And even the Iron Man armor has been approved. So what if there are a few more sets of exoskeleton armor? So this exercise is stable. Minister Li has completely put his mind at ease and exhaled a long breath. This matter is simply a big stone stuck in his heart. But today this big stone has finally been shattered. He even has the feeling of wanting to roar to the sky. But fortunately, he forced himself to hold it back. Otherwise everyone here would be waiting to see him laugh. Okay, if you don't fight for me this time, I won't be able to fight for you up there. The chief looked at Minister Li's smug look, rolled his eyes helplessly, and then turned his eyes to look at the mecha. The shock in his eyes is simply lingering. After all, this is normal. Who wouldn't be shocked when they see the mecha for the first time? After all, this thing can only exist in science fiction movies. I already know about the mecha, and the higher-ups have also received the news. The higher-ups attach great importance to the mecha, and have even classified it as a state secret. So unless under special circumstances, the mecha is almost not allowed to be used. Of course, if you can create something equivalent to a mecha, this rule will be invalidated. Suppressing the shock in his heart, the leader spoke to everyone. Hearing this, the corners of the other people's mouths twitched. What do you mean you can create a new existence equivalent to a mecha? Isn't that something in a science fiction movie? Can this thing be made casually? Why don't they believe it? However, this order was actually announced by the higher-ups, so they must have taken the mecha to the extreme. In fact, this mecha is just a sample machine. I think it can be upgraded in terms of weapons. At present, I have an idea for a melee weapon. If it can be perfected, it will be a complete mecha. Everyone was still in shock, and Lin Shen's untimely voice rang out. After hearing this, the others paused for a moment and turned to look at Lin Shen. It was as if he was looking at a monster. In fact, who can say it wasn't true? Who can come up with these scientific products at the age of freshman? This not only improves China's technology by several levels, even if it is put in the whole world, it can advance the world's technology by hundreds of years. Chapter 64, Mecha? That's fake. Please don't believe it. The mecha was already a terrifying existence, and Lin Shen actually said that the weapons of this thing could be upgraded. What was he trying to do? Although they were shocked, it would be a lie to say that they didn't like it. After all, Lin Shen was a talented man from China, and the things he researched naturally belonged to China, so they naturally hoped that things would get better and better. Okay, Lin, I really don't know what words to use to describe you. There is only one young man like you in the entire history of China. Even the higher-ups don't know how to reward you. The merits you have brought are really too great. The chief spoke with emotion, and the others nodded subconsciously. If they wanted to think about it, they really couldn't think of anything else to reward Lin Shen with. Lin Shen smiled and shook his head. Actually, I really don't need it. To be honest, my original intention of researching it was just to make myself happy. If the country doesn't give me the permission, I can't fly the Iron Man armor and mecha I made with my own money. So it's equivalent to the country providing me with this platform, and it can also help the country improve its technological strength, which is also what I deserve. As for requests, to be honest, I don't have more requests. Lin Shen's words may be a little selfish, but it is indeed true. At the same time, it is also common sense. The others nodded after hearing this. Having said that, this reward will definitely be retained no matter what. But what kind of reward will be given? It's just that we have to discuss it with the higher-ups. But at least for now, Zealand, you can raise any request you have. I believe the higher-ups will satisfy you to the greatest extent. The chief nodded slightly, and could only speak helplessly. After saying this, the shocking atmosphere just now gradually eased. When everyone's eyes were cast on the mecha again, they were no longer as excited as they were at the beginning. The next thing they should discuss is nothing more than some issues about mechas. However, the shock brought by mechas is not only to the people present and the senior officials of China. There are also people in some parts of China. They all claimed that they had seen mechas, and some people took blurry photos and posted them online. There was even one photo that was seen through a telescope. After all, most mechas fly at an altitude of about 10,000 meters, and only a few people can see them. But since someone spread it like this, the discussion of mechas has naturally become more and more popular. Even countless people have begun to speculate, and many video bloggers have begun to bring heat. Have you heard that there seems to be mechas appearing recently? But isn't it something that can only be seen in science fiction movies? Is there anything else to say? It's definitely aliens invading the Earth. If I were a high school student, I might firmly say it's impossible, but I'm a college student, so I would ask a question. Is it fake? I have a clear photo here. I wonder if you have seen it. In addition, there are many people on the internet who have taken photos in different places. Suddenly, there was a marketing account that released some information about the picture. Everyone started to get excited. When they heard this, they all jumped to check. These are not the most important things. The most important thing is that the pictures are indeed blurry, and that thing looks like mecha. As more and more people talked, the popularity even rushed to the top. The first part of the hot search was about the existence of the mecha. However, 10 minutes later, all the channels that were watching TV or even live broadcasts suddenly switched. A Mediterranean man in military uniform appeared on everyone's screen. Hello, everyone, I am the director. Today I received news that someone saw something about the mecha. At the same time, some people said it was an alien invasion. For this point, our military is here to clarify with everyone. These are all rumors and false. Please do not believe these facts. In addition, everyone must not believe in rumors, make rumors, or spread rumors. The voice of the director came, and what he said was actually just this. But this short video was played in a loop for 10 minutes, and everyone was able to restore the channel they were watching to its original state. In addition, everyone was surprised to find that the previous topics about mechas and alien invasions, and even photos, had all disappeared. If you think about it a little, you will know that this is definitely official intervention. However, since the official has begun to come out to refute the rumor, it is obvious that this is definitely false, and this is actually the role of the Strategic Research Institute. After all, there are always times when there are unexpected revelations when testing secret weapons. At this time, the Strategic Research Institute will stand up. Otherwise, these topics will sooner or later be heard by some foreign people with ulterior motives. At that time, the secret weapons will naturally not play the role of secret weapons. So many times, they are deceived by such a trick. In fact, everyone naturally maintains an attitude of approval for such an official statement. After all, if there is really an alien invasion, why wait until now? The person who spread such a rumor is probably not a person who has read too many novels. After the heat passed, everyone just discussed it briefly, and then went to do their own things. At this time in the factory area, Lin Shen had already led everyone to explain the materials about mechas. In fact, he was also very troubled at this time, because the materials of the mecha were made of the machines he specially upgraded. In other words, he not only had to explain the materials of the mecha, but also those special machines. Lin Shen could even foresee how shocking this would be to others. But anyway, everyone had heard enough shock today, so naturally they didn't care about this. So just talk about it. Zihuan and Professor Wang were like students, nodding as they listened. They even looked in the direction of the operating equipment. They couldn't wait to operate it now to see if it was true. In terms of equipment, these are almost the ones I upgraded, and the next is the materials that everyone is looking forward to. Chapter 65, I've put the food in your mouth. It depends on how you eat it. Lin Shen paused for a moment, almost whetting everyone's appetite before he spoke again. The material is indeed a new type of material that I have researched, and it is a multi-alloy steel, which uses 6 kinds of raw material alloys to fuse the materials needed to make mechas. While Lin Shen was speaking, he swiped his hand on the projection screen in front of him, and the raw materials appeared in front of everyone. Zihuan and Professor Wang both looked over at the first time. They thought that these should be relatively scarce metals. Otherwise how could they fuse materials with such density? But when they looked over, they found that most of these materials were relatively common. Only one of them was slightly more expensive in the market, but even so, it was still not a rare material. In this way, it can be completely fused and produced in large quantities. It is not even just used in the mecha industry. Even in other areas, metals with a density far exceeding that of diamond can completely beat other things, even many unreasonable experiments. If these materials are used and continue to be experimented, I am afraid that they may really be successful. After all, the main reason for the failure of some experiments is that the materials cannot withstand the impact of the experiment. Once the materials can withstand it, countless experiments of this type will be turned over and tested again. Therefore, many abandoned plans can naturally be re-implemented. Lin Shen has not simply developed a mecha, but has obviously developed a treasure trove for China to develop, and it is the kind that feeds the food into the mouth. After that, whether to swallow it directly or taste it carefully before swallowing it depends on the choice of others. The chief seemed to know what this meant, and the excitement in his eyes could not be suppressed. What do you think? If we use the same material to build a fighter, then can the 6th generation aircraft we make be far superior to the 5th generation aircraft made by the Eagle Sauce? Minister Li suddenly spoke. However, everyone present looked at him as if he was an idiot. Minister Li, I suspect you are talking nonsense. Let alone developing a new 6th generation aircraft. Even if we simply use new materials to refurbish the 5th generation aircraft, the performance will probably be several times higher than the prototype of the 5th generation aircraft. The two are not the same concept at all, Professor Wang explained solemnly, and Minister Li scratched his head and stopped talking. Although he is a minister, to be honest, his cultural level is not high, especially for these scientific things. He can be said to know nothing, but Professor Wang said it so clearly that he actually understood the value of this new material. Next, Lin Shen explained other aspects of Saria in detail, for example, the weapons, the thrusters, and the energy conversion inside the mecha, and other detailed things. It can be said that they were completely analyzed in front of everyone. Everyone was fascinated by what he heard. Even the old man Zuo, who didn't know much about materials, was listening carefully. It was not until Lin Shen was dry-mouthed that he finished what he should say. Although they may not be able to understand and remember everything, at least with the wisdom of the people present, they can see that the drawings are almost the same and they don't understand. This is enough. If it really doesn't work, you can come and ask him. Chief, I would like to request to build a test range in the open space of the factory, and it should be able to test giants such as mechas. What do you think? Lin Shen ignored the people who were thinking, and looked at the chief beside him. The chief's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he clapped his hands and decided immediately. He was afraid that Lin Shen would not have any requirements, and that the continuous development of new technologies would make their senior management feel a little guilty. After all, it would be a bad idea to not be able to help at all. But now that there are requirements, it will be easy, and it's just to build a shooting range and weapon test range for mechas, which is no problem at all. Even if a shooting range is damaged in a day, It is no problem to come back and rebuild it. The more frequent the tests, the more successful the improvement of the mechas will be, and they are eager for this. Don't worry, Zealand, I will arrange for someone to come and build it right away. It will be done for you within 2 days. The chief patted his chest and promised, and then thought about it and said this again. But this factory area has no name yet, which is a bit inconvenient. Why not just call it the Ice City Experimental Center in the future? Lin Shen thanked him, and the chief immediately arranged it. At the same time, Minister Li also left the experimental center with great interest. He was going to get the Iron Man armor next. As a man, Minister Li has been coveting these things for a long time. Since the moment he saw the Iron Man armor, he has been completely attracted by it. It's just that he has never had the opportunity to touch it. Now that he has the opportunity, he naturally has to try it out first. And there is no need to worry about this attempt at all, because the subsequent Iron Man armors, including the first set, have been re-implanted with Chinese chips. So even if they fly over, they will be recognized as their own. Minister Li came to the previous experimental base, showed a warrant, and successfully obtained a set of Iron Man armor. Then he couldn't wait to put it on himself. Feeling his body wrapped in steel, Minister Li's smile became brighter. Then he turned into a ray of light and soared into the sky. At the same time, he contacted his subordinates to arrange the military exercise. After all, there are not many days left before the military exercise. Naturally, we have to prepare well, otherwise, the whole team will be frowning, and people will really think that they don't have any secret weapons waiting to be beaten this time. Fortunately, Minister Li still has some reason and knows that he can't be seen too much by others. So when he was flying, he deliberately chose to fly over the wilderness. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the internet will set off a wave of Iron Man fever. At that time, the Strategic Research Institute will still be in trouble. In another training ground somewhere, there is a huge tent. There are more than a dozen people sitting in the tent with sad faces. Deputy Captain, what do you think the captain can do to deal with the little tigers? These guys have had some secret weapons in the past 2 years, and they always catch us off guard. I'm afraid they will come up with something again this year. Chapter 66. For the exercise, we got the Iron Man armor. An adjutant looked at his deputy captain with some worry. The others also looked worried. Obviously they were not sure about the upcoming military exercise. Don't mention those bastards. They just rely on the people behind them to get these rare equipment. If they didn't have those equipment, even if I pulled a hair off my leg, I could beat them into pig heads. The deputy captain roared, his face full of unwilling anger. The others nodded after hearing this. After all, they were the old team that had really been on the battlefield, and the little tigers were just new recruits that had not been established for a long time. They had not even been on the real battlefield, and the gap between the two sides was just because of their equipment. But losing is losing. There is really nothing to say. And if it was just an ordinary loss, it would be fine. After all, exercises are definitely wins and loses, and they are all teams from the same country. The stronger their own people are, the happier they are. It's just that the little tigers are too arrogant. Every time they win, they have to make provocations. This is simply offending people to death. So it would be strange if they were not angry. Forget it, Deputy Captain, don't be angry for now. Anyway, the captain just sent a message that he already has a solution. Maybe this time he can really turn defeat into victory. The adjutant who just spoke again to comfort him. The deputy captain was a little comrade this time, with a hint of a bitter smile on his face. How can it be so easy to find a solution? And even if there's a solution, I'm afraid it can only be used to deal with the old little tigers. Their methods and special mechanical devices in the past must have made us no match at all. This year one got news that they seem to have a new batch of tactical missiles, and that batch of tactical missiles is the main target we have to face. When the deputy captain said this, the helplessness in his eyes became more and more obvious. The faces of the others changed slightly, and then they immediately became angry. What the hell? Tactical missiles have been brought here. Are they really going to destroy us all? Everyone knew that although it was an exercise, it was naturally impossible to use real tactical missiles. However, if the blank cartridges of tactical missiles were really released directly, their camp would still be destroyed directly. At that time, it would basically be equivalent to losing this exercise again. Even the other party didn't have to do anything. So what was the point of this exercise? Everyone clenched their fists and relaxed, wanting to say something but couldn't. Isn't this a naked humiliation? But they were helpless after all, because these military exercises did not limit their ability to get weapons. This was their own ability. If he didn't have the ability to get these weapons, he would naturally be able to turn defeat into victory. It's a pity that they don't have this ability. Little guys, what are you sighing about? As if you are going to lose this time. At this time, a voice sounded in the tent, and everyone looked up and saw a huge figure standing at the door. The figure's physique was even more than 2 meters tall, but that voice was the voice of their captain. But when did their captain become so tall? A trace of doubt flashed in everyone's eyes. But when the figure walked in, everyone was dumbfounded, because the person standing in front of them, to be precise, is not a person, but Iron Man. What are you doing? How come you don't recognize me after changing my outfit? Minister Li's voice came again from inside the Iron Man armor. After hearing this, everyone came back to their senses, and walked forwards one by one, carefully examining the Iron Man armor. The deputy captain who sighed before even knocked on the Iron Man armor. Captain, where did you get such a realistic armor? The price of this kind of toy should not be cheap, but it's useless for you to wear it. While saying this, the deputy captain also said in amazement. The eyes of the others were full of envy. They also watched the movie Iron Man armor in their spare time. Of course, they envied those Iron Man armors that could fly and hide. After all, no matter what, they still exist as men. As long as they are men, they are basically unable to avoid such temptations. What kind of toy is this? Am I kidding you with this? And do you think I'm kidding you when I say I've found a solution? Minister Li snorted coldly and walked out. Everyone looked at each other and hurried to follow. After they came out, the other busy people heard the noise and rushed over. When they saw Iron Man standing in front of them for the first time, they were all stunned. But the next second, everyone shut up and quietly watched Iron Man, or Minister Li, walking in front of a military jeep. Minister Li, wearing Iron Man armor, opened his arms to hug the back of the military jeep, and then slowly lifted it up with a force. The whole jeep was lifted above his head, and Minister Li even slowly withdrew one hand. He is now holding a jeep with one hand. Everyone who saw this scene was almost speechless. It was obviously summer, but everyone felt a chill from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. Even the terrifying recoil seemed to blow their heads off. The deputy captain who had joked about toys before now opened and closed his mouth but couldn't say anything. My goodness, you are really serious. For an exercise, you even brought a real Iron Man armor. And how was this thing made? Everyone had such a doubt in their hearts, and the people in the distance felt that their worldviews were shattered. How about it? Do you believe it now? Minister Li turned his head and glanced around with a proud look. As if the shock of the crowd was not enough, he kicked his feet slightly and jumped more than 3 meters on the spot. Then, a faint blue flame spurted out from his feet, and the whole person was directly suspended in the air with the jeep. This scene shocked everyone so much that they almost couldn't even stand. Some new recruits who had never seen the world fell to the ground when they saw this scene. At this moment, the whole audience was as silent as death, and everyone's eyes were fixed on Minister Li, who was hovering in the air. Chapter 67, On the Eve of Military Exercise. What is this? Tell me what this is. Is there really such a thing as armor in the world that can fly? Everyone expressed disbelief. But this is indeed a fact for everyone. It happened right in front of their eyes. If they don't believe it, how can they prove the fact? Minister Li drove the Iron Man armor slowly to the ground, and then put down the military jeep in his hand. Don't worry now. Even if those guys have tactical missiles, this thing is not to be afraid of at all. I'm afraid that the weapons in the hands of the opponent are not fierce enough. Otherwise it will be boring to fight. While Minister Li was speaking, there were bursts of crackling sounds from behind, and then he walked out. Everyone was silently looking at the Iron Man armor standing quietly on the ground. Each of them had a burning look in their eyes. Then they all exclaimed and surrounded it. One by one, they surrounded the Iron Man armor, and some even reached out to touch the Iron Man armor. The look was like a hungry wolf seeing food. "Captain, tell me the truth. Where did you get this thing from? Even if there is a real Iron Man armor, shouldn't it be handed over to the country? Why are we allowed to use it for exercises?" "Yes, Captain, if this thing can be used for exercises, it naturally means that there is a risk of exposure." "Has the higher-ups really approved it?" everyone asked at once. The deputy captain, who sighed before, now stared at the Iron Man armor, never moving away for a moment. It has to be said that with the existence of this thing, the secret weapon possessed by the little tigers on the opposite side seems to be nothing. After all, this is a real Iron Man armor. It can allow an ordinary person to carry a military jeep and fly in the air. Such a terrifying armor has long surpassed the role of tactical missiles in everyone's mind. What is a mere tactical missile? Iron Man can directly destroy the opponent's team. Don't worry about that. I borrowed the Iron Man armor from the chief, and this thing must be approved. Otherwise, if I use it privately, I will be punished even if I have 10 heads. Minister Li responded with a smug look on his face. Although the others had expected such a situation, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when they heard this. They also believed that their captain would not do such a thing that would not benefit themselves. It just so happens that tomorrow is the exercise, so there is no need to do any training today. Have a good rest. The others go back first. The deputy captain stays. Minister Li waved his hand, and the others showed a little confusion on their faces. "Captain, don't you need to arrange a plan or something?" one of the soldiers asked cautiously. "Arrange? Why not arrange it? But those plans have nothing to do with you. Just do what you need to do. If you don't need to rest, I can also assign new extra training tasks." Minister Li glared, exploding with the majesty of a minister. The rest of the people shook their heads, and then turned around and ran away with a smile. They didn't even have a day off for a long time on weekdays. Today, they finally had such a day off, so they naturally couldn't miss it. Those who need to rest should rest, and those who need to go home should go home. They didn't even care much about tomorrow's military exercise. After all, the Iron Man armor is on their side, so what do they need to worry about? If even the Iron Man armor can't win this military exercise, then no matter how much they worry, it won't be of much use. "Captain, what are you doing?" Watching the others leave, the deputy captain looked at Minister Li with a puzzled look on his face. "I tell you, tomorrow you will drive this Iron Man armor, and hide on the side from the beginning and don't come out. After the other side uses tactical missiles, I will go and destroy them alone." Minister Li looked at the Iron Man armor in front of him with a sly smile on his face. The deputy captain was slightly stunned, and then a look of astonishment appeared on his face. "Ah, me? Then what are you doing, Captain?" He opened his mouth subconsciously, and then the deputy captain closed his mouth. In fact, he was very much looking forward to driving the Iron Man armor. After all, it was so handsome. Which man could refuse it? "What else can I do? I'm old and not as energetic as you young people. I'll just enjoy myself in the camp, waiting for them to come and wipe us out, and then you can go over and fight them one-on-one." Minister Li spread his hands, and his words made the deputy captain's mouth twitch slightly. Now he knew what his deputy captain was thinking. Obviously, this was to avenge the insults he had suffered in the past 2 years. It was obvious that they were there to send off the entire military exercise, but in the end there was only one person left. That person drove the Iron Man armor and appeared on the scene, and was wiped out by the opponent. The feeling of insult was simply the most extreme. However, the deputy captain did not resist at all, but had a strong joy on his face. This was the ending he hoped for. Who told the little tigers to be so arrogant in the past 2 years? Even after they beat their seniors, they still came here to show off for a while. This naturally gave those guys no chance. Now they have a chance to fight back fiercely. Naturally, they will not miss it. There will be a good show to watch next. At the same time, on the little tiger's side, as the captain, Wang, who was sitting in the barracks with a smile. "Captain, this time we can say we are stable. Even if we can make something like tactical missiles, what else can those guys from the Flying Dragon team use to stop us?" The deputy captain next to him also had an excited look on his face. "Not only that, but this year we won the first place again, and the support we can get from above will naturally double." At the same time, Those guys from the Flying Dragon team will also have some resources withdrawn. They can even get the blessing of expanding the team, which is simply killing two birds with one stone. The deputy captain became more and more excited, but Wang Hu pressed his hand down. Keep a low profile. After all, as the new generation, we should be pushed forward by the old ones. If we can't even beat the old seniors, then to be honest, there's no need for us to stay any longer. Let's just win beautifully this time. I hope Captain Li of the Flying Dragon team can withstand such a blow. Chapter 68. The military exercise begins. Let's have some fun with them. One day passed quickly, and the two teams were already on full alert. Their own military camps were located across a mountain. The mountain in the middle was where they were going to face off. In this area, only by making the other side completely annihilate or surrender can they win this military exercise. Now, on a distant hilltop, several elderly men in military uniforms were standing with smiles on their faces. The chief who had previously agreed to lend the Iron Man armor to Minister Li was also here. What do you think of this? One of the elderly men looked at the others with a smile, and his eyes occasionally looked towards the little tigers. Obviously, it goes without saying that he must have favored the little tigers. After all, almost everyone has received the news that the little tigers have a tactical missile as their last trump card. In addition, not to mention that they have some exoskeleton armor. Those exoskeleton armors are definitely the most advanced. In fact, I think this third written test is not important at all. As one of the main teams of the younger generation, the little tigers have proven their strength in the first two games. Indeed, from various angles, the little tigers deserve this evaluation. In fact, I also think that the little tigers still have a great chance of winning this time. Following the first person's opening, the others also spoke up. Obviously, for them, the victory of the little tigers may be considered a sure thing. You can't say that. After all, the Flying Dragons are also an old team. The only thing they lack is equipment. In fact, I feel that this is a bit unfair. Although it is a competition of one's own connections, if you really go to the battlefield, the equipment is still provided uniformly. Of course, there may be people who speak for the Flying Dragons. Both sides have their own opinions. Finally, they turned their eyes to the leader. The leader shook his head slightly and did not directly respond to the other party's question. Why think so much? Anyway, we will know the outcome when it comes out this time, and this is the last time, so just wait quietly. Hearing this, the others nodded one after another, and they agreed with this statement. They are all high-ranking officials in the army, and most of the time they have to issue orders. Although they each hold their own opinions, at least for the overall situation, they can still see the situation clearly. After the discussion, they all stopped talking silently. Then a drone was sent out, projecting the entire battlefield situation in front of everyone. Then, with an order, the contest between the two sides began. In the Little Tigers team, Wang Hu was still sitting leisurely in the military tent, but he picked up the phone in his hand and dialed it directly. On the other side, in the Flying Dragon's tent, the sound of the phone rang, and after Minister Li answered the call, he sat leisurely in the same place, even holding a thermos cup in his hand. A rich aroma came from the thermos cup. Minister Li, the exercise has started now. Are you ready? Of course, if you need it, I can provide you with some exoskeleton armor. Wang Hu's voice came from the other end of the phone. Although there was no radical tone in the other party's voice, it was easy to feel that this guy was very arrogant. In fact, the meaning of this call was to provoke. Thank you for your kindness. Young people like you have a wide network of contacts, but now that the exercise has started, don't exercises rely on your own strength? Don't worry about us. Just start the war directly, Minister Li said, and leisurely drank a sip of tea in the thermos cup, without any emotion on his face. If it were him before, he would have been furious after hearing such a provocation. After all, he is not a person who can hold back his temper. But now, there are Iron Man armors here, and those guys are all jumping clowns without exception. Minister Li is even looking forward to what kind of expression those guys will have when they see his Iron Man armor in action. Thinking about it, a smile slowly appeared on the corner of his mouth. Then, Minister Li hung up the phone directly. Wang Hu on the other side heard the other party's lukewarm tone, but he began to hold back his anger in his heart. Before, he wanted to see Minister Li's angry look every time, but he couldn't do anything about them. This time it didn't work. I think the other party must have some trump cards of their own. Otherwise it would be impossible to be so calm. But even if the trump cards are strong, what can they do? They have a tactical missile. What chassis can stop their tactical missiles? Wang Hu's mouth slowly curled up a sneer, and then he gave an order. The first batch of soldiers will go out. The first batch of soldiers he mentioned are soldiers carrying exoskeleton armor. The main role is to charge and explore. Although they have won twice, they must not underestimate the enemy when marching. No matter what the outcome is, they still have to do what they should do. Now that there are some problems in the exercise, they can be adjusted later, but if they really come to the battlefield, any small problem may cost a life. Even the proud Wang Hu was unwilling to pay this price. In the military tent of the Flying Dragon team, Captain, we have detected that those guys have begun to move. Please give orders. The team member in charge of monitoring came to Minister Li and reported. I know. Send the first team to meet those guys. Let's see whether their exoskeleton armor is harder or ours. Minister Li waved his hand casually, without any sense of urgency in his eyes. The soldier in charge of the message also flashed a hint of excitement when he heard this. They had obviously seen the batch of exoskeleton armor, although there were only 10 sets. But each set of exoskeleton armor was a full-body armor, compared to the opponent's half-body exoskeleton armor. Some of them were only part of the exoskeleton armor on the arms and feet. That was so much more advanced. Just this batch of exoskeleton armor teams can solve all the problems for those guys. As for the Iron Man armor, it must be kept in the bottom of the box and sent out. Now is not the time to send it out. We have to give the opponent a surprise. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. That's just a freshman. In the jungle, the little tigers and the flying dragons are now approaching the center. The little tigers have a total of 50 members, and each of them has some metal skeletons on their bodies. These are their more advanced exoskeleton armors. However, the largest one among them only covers half of the body. But even so, it is still at the top of China's current technology. On the other hand, the number of the flying dragons is a bit pitiful, with only 10 people, but everyone is covered with a full set of exoskeleton armor, and even the guns are stuck on the edge of the exoskeleton armor. There is also a slot specially made for storing guns. While the two sides are getting closer, the senior executives who are watching the battle on the top of the mountain have seen the situation of both sides through the drone screen. Most of them are satisfied with the current situation of the little tigers. After all, this group of pioneers of the little tigers is the perfect peak in any team. When they just moved their eyes to the other side, everyone except the leader was stunned. What is this? If I'm not mistaken, this should also be an exoskeleton armor, right? But why is it a full-body armor? Everyone else nodded when they heard this. There was a strong sense of confusion in their eyes when they looked at each other. Obviously, they had never heard of when their own technology had developed to this level. Even the difficulties that had never been overcome had already been made into full-body exoskeleton armor. I remember that this team should be commanded by the leader himself, right? Suddenly, someone said something, and everyone's eyes turned around. The curiosity in their eyes was already strong to the extreme, compared with the win or loss of the two teams. In fact, everyone present was more willing to see that both sides could show stronger strength, because the stronger the strength they showed, it naturally meant that the strength of their own country was stronger. And now, it was obvious that a scene that everyone was particularly happy to see appeared. Seeing the eyes of the others, the leader couldn't help but laugh. In fact, he had no plans to hide, otherwise he would not have allowed Minister Li to lead him out. He didn't even prepare to hide the Iron Man armor, let alone these full-body exoskeleton armors. As you can see, this is indeed a full-body exoskeleton armor. As for the strength, I believe I don't need to say more. The chief did not deny it, and admitted it directly. Although they had witnessed it with their own eyes, the light in their eyes began to become brighter after they really heard the admission. Okay, it's really an exoskeleton armor, but why haven't I received any information? When did our technology develop so well? Tell me quickly if there is any progress from old Z. I remember that he has always been in charge of this project. I didn't expect that old Z, this old guy, is really hidden. He actually quietly made a full-body exoskeleton armor. The senior executives gathered together, and their eyes looked at the chief expectantly. It's not old Z, that old guy, but a young man named Lin Shen. A young man named Lin Shen. The chief shook his head helplessly. Speaking of which, he didn't think of this when he first got the news. You were at the exhibition later, and suddenly saw the Iron Man armor appear. He asked someone to check Lin Shen's news. However, the result shocked him. Lin Shen was an ordinary student before, but he made a complete exoskeleton armor for the final exam. Do you think this is the end? On the contrary, this is just the beginning. After that, he even made an Iron Man armor. That's fine. There are even controlled nuclear fusion and mechas, which are almost heaven-defying works. The leader once thought he was still dreaming, but he knew that this was real. When the others heard this name, they did show a deep doubt in their eyes. They really had never heard of this name. And his works are not just exoskeleton armor. You should know about the previous controlled nuclear fusion, right? As soon as the leader finished speaking, the others responded, how could you not know this? You don't know how excited I was when I first learned about this news. Our country has publicly disclosed one difficult problem after another, and now in the field of controlled nuclear fusion, it has directly stood at the forefront of the world. A group of senior officials said, and they couldn't help laughing at the time. It must be said that this really made them happy. The eagle sauce that had always been standing on their heads and shitting, was finally stepped on by them one day. This feeling is so good that you can wake up with laughter even in dreams. Yes, controlled nuclear fusion is also the work of that kid. It was under his leadership that Academician Zero was able to lead the team to complete their research on controlled nuclear fusion, the leader said lightly. At this moment, the atmosphere on the top of the mountain dropped to freezing point. Everyone was stunned and stood there, as if they had not reacted to what was going on. What? These two don't seem to have anything to do with each other, but they were researched by the same person. It's unbelievable. When did our country have such a talent? Yes, someone who can be so involved in both aspects is a talent that only appears once in 1,000 years. He must be cultivated well. This is the future of our China. But is that young man named Lin Shen also a hidden academician? The senior officials looked at the leader with burning eyes, as if they wanted to see something from him. No, he is just a freshman who just graduated. Moreover, he was specially approved to graduate because of his ability. The leader spread his hands, showing a slightly young attitude. Oh, so he is a freshman. I was wondering why I had never heard of him. No, he is a freshman. One of the senior executives just opened his mouth and realized that what he said was wrong. He immediately turned his head to look at the others. He found that the faces of the others had already frozen. What? A freshman? Are you kidding? Chapter 70. Eliminated instantly. Do I have to joke? The chief's voice was a little helpless. When he first heard the news, he was more shocked than the others. Not to mention that there was an Iron Man armor behind him. It would be fine if there were only the first two. However, the chief had no intention of revealing the Iron Man armor in advance. Anyway, he was shocked, so he had to let others be more shocked. Otherwise, how could he justify the shock he had felt before? Okay, we are still in the process of rehearsal. Let's watch the rehearsal first. The chief waved his hand and obviously had no intention of continuing. The others nodded with a stiff look on their faces and looked at the screen again. Even so, their hearts were still filled with shock and they had no time to recover. Not to mention them, anyone who heard such news would probably jump up from the spot. If any academician could do this, it would be normal. But no matter how you think about it, this is what the chief said, so it must be the truth. So let's wait until the end of the military exercise to ask in detail what's going on. At this moment, the vanguards of the two teams in the jungle have begun to contact each other in the middle. The 10 vanguards of the Flying Dragon team have already made preparations, But the 50 vanguards of the Little Tiger team were stunned when they saw that their opponents only had 10 people. After carefully looking at the equipment on the other side, they were even more stunned. As a team that has been in contact with exoskeleton mechas for a long time, they can naturally see at a glance that the equipment on the other side is definitely exoskeleton armor. But didn't it agree that the most advanced exoskeleton armor in the country is the one they are wearing? What's the matter with the full set of exoskeleton armor on the other side? However, just when they thought of this, the 10 people on the other side had already charged forward, so they didn't have time to think too much and prepared to start counterattacking. In the first charge, both sides tacitly did not use their weapons. However, at the moment of collision, the vanguards of the Little Tiger team realized their mistakes. Just this round of collision, the other side felt like endless power. 10 people actually forced the team of 50 people to retreat a distance. After such a collision, the guys of the Little Tigers were able to confirm that the opponent was definitely wearing a full-body exoskeleton armor. There was no comparison between the two sides. Although they were shocked, they did not panic at the first time, but subconsciously took out the weapons attached to the exoskeleton armor. However, just as they made a move, the team of the Flying Dragons charged again. The members of the Little Tigers did not even hold the guards' guns firmly, and were directly knocked back. The guns in their hands also fell out of their hands. Because of the chaos in the front troops, the people behind them were too late to react. Only 10 people directly broke up the team of 50 people and even split it in half. At this time, the 10 members of the Flying Dragons had successfully removed the guns attached to the exoskeleton armor. After a burst of gunfire, the 50 people on the opposite side basically began to smoke. They had been hit, so it was equivalent to their elimination, so they could only put down their guns and walk out of the field one by one. They had never thought that 50 people on their side would be eliminated without even seeing the opponent's intelligence. Even when they left, they had already begun to mourn for the other team members. The Flying Dragon team actually had this new equipment. It seemed that they would be difficult to fight in this game. Even with tactical missiles, they would still be caught off guard. But no matter what, the next ending was no longer something they could participate in, so just wait for the birth of the ending quietly. At this time, the Little Tiger team had already learned that 50 of their team members had been eliminated. Captain Wang Hu was slightly stunned, although he had expected that his team might be eliminated. After all, those 50 were pioneers, and they were just there to get information, but he didn't expect that they would be eliminated so quickly. I'm afraid they had just been in contact for a short time, and where was the information that was supposed to be used for getting information? How come it was all eaten? It seems that they didn't get any information at all, but were sent out by the opponent just after the end. Thinking of this, Wang Hu's face suddenly showed a bit of solemnity. Obviously, he also knew that the Flying Dragon team definitely had its own trump card this time, otherwise, it would definitely not be able to do this. As expected, it is an old team. After 2 years of preparation, they still have something, but relying on this little means alone, it can't affect the battle situation at all. While Wang Hu was talking to himself, he had already raised his head and looked at the deputy captain beside him. Let the second team go out. This time let them see our true strength. After the deputy captain took the order, Wang Hu also showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. This time, it is not just a tactical missile that is prepared. After all, that thing is used as a trump card. If they can crush the opponent without using such a trump card, wouldn't it be more proof of their strength? On the top of the mountain, everyone looked at the 10-man team that completed the counterattack in an instant, and they were all amazed. Even the leader saw the combat capability of the full-body exoskeleton armor in actual combat for the first time. Compared with the previous half-body exoskeleton armor, this is not even close. Although it was a bit unprepared, the difference in strength can still be seen. Not to mention that the 10 people of the Flying Dragon team fought off the opponent's 50 people. They are not at the same level at all. Not to mention that this kind of full-body exoskeleton armor can be mass-produced, which is no different from the half-body exoskeleton armor. This is one of the most practical places. The Flying Dragon team has naturally received the news that the 50 pioneers of the Little Tiger team have been completely wiped out. They all have a strong look of joy on their faces. Obviously, they did not expect this. After all, the pioneers are all well-equipped players. They were wiped out just after the contact. It seems that this time the victory is really in their hands. Chapter 71 Intercepting Tactical Missiles. That looks like Iron Man's armor. In the camp of the Little Tigers, Wang Hu was still pondering what the secret weapon of the flying dragons was. However, the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. According to the current technology, the flying dragons should not be able to quietly destroy their first team. After all, there were 50 elite warriors wearing exoskeleton armor. Even if they were completely wiped out, they should have sent some useful information. But now they are just like evaporating from the face of the earth, melting when touched. Who can stand that? No, it's still a little unsafe to just send out the second team. Let's just end it. Wang Hu thought of this and stood up. There was a little gloom in his eyes, and it was obvious that he felt that some irresistible factors were at work this time. It is said that a lion will use all its strength to fight a rabbit. If he still holds this cat playing with mouse mentality, it is very likely that the previous 2 years of hard work will end in vain. So just end it. Pass my order. The second team will delay the attack and take over the defense of the hill. At the same time, transport the tactical missiles and fire directly at the opponent's camp. Wang Hu's voice came out through the intercom. The deputy captain, who had just left to arrange for the departure of the second team, was slightly stunned, but still went to execute the order. He was just a deputy captain, and naturally he didn't need to ask too much about the captain's orders. What's more, once the tactical missiles were launched, it would be good for everyone to end this exercise as soon as possible. They were still waiting for the awards to be presented in advance. After all, the winner of the military exercise for 3 consecutive years will be specially praised by the upper level and promoted to a special military operation team. At the same time, the resources obtained by the entire team will double on the original basis. This is the goal of the Little Tigers. As the order was issued, the tactical missiles in the Little Tigers camp began to be prepared. The target was naturally the camp of the Flying Dragons. As long as the opponent's battalion commander was captured alive, or the opponent's camp was destroyed, the military exercise could be won. Then their tactical missiles would naturally be locked on the opponent's camp and launched. Once the camp is gone, even if the battalion commander is still there, the Little Tigers will be able to capture the other side without any effort. In this way, the winner of the military exercise will naturally emerge. With a whoosh, the tactical missile took off and flew directly towards the camp of the Flying Dragon team. Minister Li was still sitting in the camp at this time, drinking leisurely, and suddenly the alarm sounded. Report to the captain. The radar detected a missile flying towards our camp in the distance. Suddenly a soldier came to report, with a little panic in his eyes. Minister Li was also slightly stunned, and then frowned. This damn little calf is too vigilant. He has already used his trump card in the confrontation just now. But it's okay, since you want to end it as soon as possible. Then I will play with you. He stood up and took the walkie-talkie at hand. It's your turn, Deputy Captain. Others should do what they should do. The latter sentence was naturally said to the soldier who just came to report. Hearing this, the soldier thought he had misheard, and was stunned for a moment before coming back to his senses. Captain, that's a tactical missile. Is it really okay if we don't avoid it? The soldier's tone was a little trembling. After all, it was the first time they were locked by a tactical missile. Although it is impossible for this tactical missile to be filled with gunpowder and other explosive things, after all, this is just a military exercise, not an enemy. This so-called tactical missile is just a tactical missile shell, plus some explosive materials. So after the missile lands, it will produce an explosive effect. There will be a small instrument on the bulletproof vest worn by everyone in the military exercise. If it detects that it is hit by a bullet, or if the explosive effect is too strong, the instrument will be activated. At the same time, it means being eliminated. This is the biggest role of this tactical missile. I said don't worry about it, so don't worry about it. Go do what you are doing, Minister Li said and sat down again, without any panic on his face. Instead, he leisurely drank another sip of tea. Seeing this, the soldier could only turn around and leave. Even their own captain is like this, so what are they panicking about? The worst that can happen is that they will be stunned for a while. Anyway, they will not die. On the other side, the deputy captain had already hidden in the bushes wearing the Iron Man armor. After receiving the order, a little excitement flashed in the deputy captain's eyes. This is his first time to fight in the Iron Man armor, so he must perform well. As for the tactical missile launched by the opponent, he wants to see if it works in front of the Iron Man armor. The deputy captain sneered, then patted his hands on the ground lightly, and his body went straight to the sky. At the same time, a missile with a stream of light was flying quickly not far away. It was the tactical missile launched by the Little Tigers. At this time, the members of the Little Tigers stopped their actions, and each of them was observing the movement here with a telescope. The smile on Wang Hu's face could no longer be suppressed, and it was almost split behind his ears. However, just when the tactical missile was about to fall, suddenly a red figure rushed straight into the sky. It hit the tactical missile from the side, but the tactical missile did not explode immediately, but was carried to the side by the red figure. After a few seconds, a terrifying buzzing sound came from afar. It was a tactical missile that exploded. It was just that it was at least 2 kilometers away from the target they were originally going to hit. If it was a normal missile, it would still be affected by such a small distance, but this was just a tactical missile with a shock effect, not to mention a difference of 2 kilometers. Even a difference of 1 kilometer would not work. In other words, their trump card was completely useless. At this time, everyone in the Little Tigers camp was watching this scene in silence. They stared blankly at the direction of the explosion, with incredible looks in their eyes. Who can tell me what happened? What was the thing that just flew out? Wang Hu's face was slightly ferocious. He never thought that his trump card would be directly solved by the bronze on the opposite side. And what exactly was that red figure? Why could it intercept the tactical missile that was almost about to fall? Is this a new type of weapon? Suddenly, a team member spoke tremblingly. Captain, that red thing looks like the Iron Man armor. Chapter 72. I'm sorry to meet you in this way, Captain Wang. After the soldier finished speaking, no one dared to speak. From the expressions on the faces of others, it was obvious that he was not the only one who saw the Iron Man armor, but he was indeed the only one who dared to speak out. Captain Wang Hu's face twisted slightly when he heard this, and then he clenched his fists tightly. Asshole, how could there be an Iron Man armor in the world? Don't talk about us, China. Even the United States, which is currently recognized as a world technological power, can't make an Iron Man armor. Are you kidding me here? Wang Hu's voice sounded like thunder, and everyone booed and dared not speak. The soldier who was scolded just now opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to defend himself, but after thinking about it, he didn't say anything. Because what Wang Hu said was the truth. It was only a certain time now. How could there be an Iron Man armor? So he could only take the scolding. After scolding for a while, Wang Hu stopped with a gloomy face. The second team is out. Defeat the enemy as quickly as possible. They had been stable for 2 years, and this time they must not let the secret weapon fail. Otherwise, all his efforts in the past 2 years would be in vain, and the loss would not only be the benefits he would get in the future. Even the secret weapons he had obtained in the past few years were obtained at a great cost, adding other connections and so on. Wang Hu could be said to have spent a lot of money on this gamble. However, just as the order was issued, a red light flew over from a distance, and Li Xun fell into the camp of the Little Tigers before he could cover his ears. The speed was so fast that it even brought bursts of air-breaking sounds. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, but when they saw the flying object clearly, they all froze in their places. Even Wang Hu, who had just cursed, was stunned when he saw this scene, his eyes full of disbelief, because what appeared in front of him was the Iron Man armor that he had just denied, and this was the existence of the explosion that just caused the tactical missile to deviate from the orbit. What's more important is not this point, but the fact that the Iron Man armor didn't even lose a bit of paint when it exploded close to the tactical missile. Although the tactical missile was only used through the shockwave, the real bombing of the camp was not a face-to-face bombing. Face-to-face bombing would inevitably cause someone to be killed by the shockwave. But the Iron Man armor just exploded close to the tactical missile. In this case, let alone losing the ability to fight, it seems that there is no damage at all. How is this possible? What the hell are you? Why did you break into our military exercise battlefield? Wang Hu looked at the Iron Man armor in front of him and subconsciously scolded him. "I'm sorry, Captain Wang Hu, although I don't want to meet you in this way, but as the deputy captain of the Flying Dragon team, I am only completing my task in the military exercise." The voice came from the Iron Man armor, and then the Iron Man armor jumped up and directly crossed more than 10 meters to Wang Hu. Before everyone could react, the Iron Man armor grabbed Wang Hu and soared into the sky, disappearing from everyone's sight. The camp of the little tigers had already fallen into a dead silence. Even the slightest movement in the forest could be heard clearly. Everyone's mouths were clearly opened, and their eyeballs were almost about to fall to the ground in surprise, especially the soldier who reported earlier. He opened his mouth to say something, but found that there was a spit stuck in his throat and he couldn't say anything. On the other side, the Iron Man armor took Captain Wang Hu all the way to the camp of the Flying Dragons. At this time, Minister Li was standing outside with a smile waiting for the arrival of the Iron Man armor. As soon as he landed, Captain Wang Hu's legs softened and he collapsed to the ground. He was completely scared. Although he was not afraid of heights, he was instantly taken to a height of dozens of meters, and then flew at a very fast speed across 2 or 3 kilometers to land in another camp. Who can bear this? I'm afraid that if the heart is a little weak, it will be scared to death. Oh my, Captain Wang Hu, such a young man, why is he sitting on the ground? Although I'm sorry that we have to meet in this way, at least we should be a good host. Come and bring a chair over, let Captain Wang Hu sit on it, Minister Li said with a smile, and soon a soldier brought a chair and pulled Wang Hu, who was lying on the ground, to the chair. After several minutes, Wang Hu finally came to his senses and glanced around with an ugly face. When he looked at Minister Li's half-smiley eyes, he closed his eyes. He knew that he had indeed lost this time, and he, a captain, had been captured alive by the other side, which naturally meant that he had still failed in this military exercise. Minister Li did not embarrass Wang Hu, although he was very angry about such a young man constantly provoking him in the past, but that was in the past. Now since he came into contact with the Iron Man armor and other things, Minister Li suddenly felt that it seemed meaningless for him to provoke in the past. Instead, it seemed that he was not very broad-minded, and he didn't even have any plans this time. He won purely by relying on the Iron Man armor. On the hill in the distance, the shocked senior executives were numb when they saw the Iron Man armor join the battle. Everyone except the chief felt a chill rushing to their brains. It seemed that the top of their heads were about to be overturned by this shock. What did they see? Iron Man armor. That's the Iron Man armor, which can only appear in movies, but it actually appeared in front of them. This is not a dream. Is it because I'm too tired recently, causing hallucinations? But it shouldn't be. The senior executives looked around and found that the others were shocked like themselves. It was obviously not their hallucinations. It's understandable that this person had hallucinations, but if everyone present had hallucinations, it would be a bit fake. Although the chief had seen the Iron Man armor directly resist an anti-aircraft missile, but now seeing the Iron Man armor show its power again, he still nodded excitedly. He was extremely satisfied with the power of this Iron Man armor. Chapter 73. Did I travel through time while sleeping? Am I dreaming? This is really Iron Man? How did he run out of the movie? Has our country's technology really developed to this point? Old Lee, tell me what year it is, so I can see if I have traveled through time and space a few decades later. For a moment, the atmosphere on the mountain became weird. Countless people who were in high positions among ordinary people seemed to have lost their minds, muttering something in their mouths. Some people even pinched their thighs and gasped in pain. The leader saw this scene and didn't know whether to laugh or cry, although he also understood this feeling. Fortunately, when he first saw the Iron Man armor, it wasn't so exaggerated. Now these guys can't stand it just seeing the Iron Man armor. If they knew the existence of the mecha, what would happen? He shook his head helplessly, and then clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. Come on, none of you have traveled through time, and you are not dreaming. This is the Iron Man armor, and it is the first one developed by our country. The chief's voice immediately pulled the others back from their fantasy. The doubts on their faces disappeared, replaced by a strong excitement. Haha, I knew it. We Chinese always have secret weapons. That's right, Otherwise how could a mere eagle sauce sit on the throne of the world's #1? This is the Iron Man armor, which is a product of future technology. It was actually developed by our country. Chief, who developed the Iron Man armor. I must visit him. When the others heard this, they all nodded, and then looked at the chief with eager eyes. The chief coughed lightly. I believe you should know this person, and you just found out. Yes, he is Lin Shen. After the voice fell, the people with excitement on their faces froze in place again. They looked at the chief blankly, as if they wanted to see if he was lying. However, the chief's expression was still so sincere, even with a little helplessness. The others came back to their senses immediately, and they were silent one by one. After all, the blow they suffered today seemed to be a bit big. Originally, seeing their full-body exoskeleton armor was shocking enough. But I didn't expect that the person who developed the exoskeleton armor was the same person who studied controlled nuclear fusion, and this person is just a freshman. In addition, he even invented the Iron Man armor. How can this be done by humans? I'm afraid that the top scientists in any country can't do this. Not to mention that all of them have been completed. Even if only one of them has been completed, it would be shocking enough to make people's scalps numb. Okay, don't look at me like that. The military exercise is over and the results are ready to be announced. The chief directly changed the subject. He didn't want to continue talking about this topic with these old guys. To be honest, the shock in his heart has not completely dissipated. After hearing this, the others could only force themselves to be quiet. Even their eyes looked down the mountain with some expectation. Speaking of which, they wanted to get close to the Iron Man armor. Since the results were to be announced, the Dragon team should bring the Iron Man armor with them. After a while, everyone gathered in an open space. The Dragon team and the Little Tiger team arrived one after another. However, what disappointed these senior executives was that the Dragon team did not bring the Iron Man armor. After the simple announcement of the results, they all surrounded them impatiently. To be honest, Minister Li also had a helpless look on his face at this time, looking at these old guys standing in front of him. He had expected such a situation a long time ago, and even thought about retreating quickly after announcing the results. You didn't expect these old guys to be so fast and surround him directly. Everyone, don't embarrass me. You have to ask the chief for the news about the Iron Man armor. He allocated this equipment to me, Minister Li said, pointing to the chief in front of the flat ground. The rest of the people's eyes quickly shifted, and Minister Li also took this opportunity to evacuate with his men. The chief's face turned green when he heard this, but he left in a hurry when he saw the old guys surrounding him. In the military camp of the Flying Dragon team. It's so cool, so fucking cool. I feel like I've never been so cool in my life. Minister Li was standing in the military camp and laughing, and so were the others. They all had a strong smile on their faces, and they exhaled a long breath. They directly exhaled all the frustration they had suffered in the past 2 years. Captain, Brother Li, this Iron Man armor. After laughing for a while, everyone's eyes turned to Captain Li. Don't look at me. The Iron Man armor, if I really want to tell you, I can only say that it is confidential. I can tell you when I can. Just pretend that you didn't see anything in this exercise. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first, Minister Li said, and without waiting for others to continue speaking, he turned around and left. On the other side, Zihuan and his team also received the news that Minister Li won the military exercise, so they all congratulated him. But in fact, they were not surprised at all. If they couldn't win the military exercise even with the Iron Man armor, then it would be a bit unrealistic to be honest. Except for Zihuan, the others were studying the drawings of the mecha. They all had a strong enthusiasm in their eyes. Compared with the Iron Man armor, this thing is much more profound, but the power is also much stronger. If it can be mass-produced, it will undoubtedly be a godsend weapon for China. When others were still studying exoskeleton armor, they had already appeared on the scene with mecha troops. Isn't this a crushing defeat? As for Lin Shen, he had long been left aside. In the words of Zihuan and his team, it was completely a cool place to stay. So Lin Shen had no choice but to start tinkering with the modification plan of the mecha. In fact, the plan he wanted to modify was not difficult. but the weapons of the mecha needed some adjustments. As a qualified mecha, it naturally cannot only have long-range attack methods. Melee weapons must also be arranged. In addition, the missiles fired by the arm parts seem to be a little too weak in this attempt. It is not in line with the identity of a mecha, and this also needs to be improved. The improved mecha will be regarded as the manufacturing method of the next mecha. Chapter 74 Red Top Secret. After finishing the design work, it was completely dark outside. Lin Shen stretched lazily, and suddenly missed the days when he was in school. But now, it is impossible for him to go back to school, let alone other things. Just the development of exoskeleton armor and the announced nuclear fusion project have attracted much attention. So when he returns to school, Lin Shen is afraid that he will not be able to walk out alive. Think about how crazy the fans of those stars are, and Lin Shen can perfectly bring himself into it. And compared to that, his current fans should be even better. Thinking of this, Lin Shen's mouth also showed a little helplessness. At this time, the chief came to the factory again. Lin Shen was slightly stunned when he saw this, with a little surprise in his eyes. When did the chief become so free? And he actually ran to him again and again. Chief, why are you so late? Oh, nothing, just come to see. By the way, tell me the news from above. The chief waved his hand and said with a strong smile on his face. He even looked at Lin Shen with great satisfaction. You know, the higher-ups really value Lin Shen, and directly listed his information as a Red Cross secret. Even the authority has been raised to the top level. As long as China can do it at present, it will do its best to satisfy Lin Shen. In addition, the country will also do its best to support and help the company founded by Lin Shen's parents. When the chief said this, Lin Shen was slightly stunned, and a little helpless appeared on his face. He didn't expect that the country would act so quickly. He had just developed this mecha, and his information was already in the confidential file the next day. In other words, the information that can be found about him at present, except for the controlled nuclear fusion that has been announced, has been erased. And if the top leaders want to check it, they must pass through several lines of defense. The Red Cross secret is the top existence among secrets, and it is said that it has not been used so far. It seems that it will be used directly on him. By the way, there may be a commendation meeting in a while, and you will be awarded medals by the higher-ups at that time. After the chief finished speaking, Lin Shen was also slightly stunned. Medals and honors are not the same concept. Since it is a medal, it is natural that a medal can only be awarded if there is merit. Now think about it. Which of the things he developed is not helpful to China's technology? Even any one of them is already a great contribution. Thinking about it this way, it is somewhat relieved. The two chatted for a few more sentences, and the leader asked for Lin Shen's phone number before turning around and leaving. Looking at the time outside, Lin Shen was not going to stay here any longer. According to his usual habit, he would go home every time it got dark, and now was no exception. It's dark. Everyone take a break. It won't be too late to study tomorrow. Lin Shen returned to the workshop again, looking at the busy and enthusiastic people, his face full of helplessness. Zihuan didn't even raise his head, still holding the printed drawings and thinking non-stop. If you want to rest, go and rest by yourself. I'm busy here. The others didn't even respond. Although Lin Shen knew that they would be so crazy, he didn't expect them to be so crazy. Even Zhu Wei seemed to have changed his mind and threw himself into research. However, what he was studying now was not the blueprint of the mecha, but the initial full-body exoskeleton armor. After all, the difference between his knowledge reserve and that of others was too great, and he could not accept studying such high-end things all at once. So he could only study and understand some simple things as much as possible while cramming his knowledge. It must be said that this guy looked a bit like a scientist. In the end, only Ling Zong couldn't bear to see Lin Shen go home alone, so he left the factory with him. The two took a taxi back to Bingcheng. Lin Shen took a long deep breath and a look of relaxation appeared on his face. I've been busy for a month and finally finished it. Next, I can have a good rest for a while. As he said that, he took Ling Zong's hand and walked outside. Tell the truth, how many things are still in your mind that you haven't figured out? Just now, there were people in the taxi, so she forced herself not to be impulsive. But now there were not many people on the street, so Lin Shen grabbed Lin Shen's hand and spoke fiercely. Seeing how Lin Shen was, Lin Shen laughed out loud. It has to be said that good-looking people are still cute even when they are aggressive. What are you laughing at? Am I funny? As a top student, I have something to be proud of, but now I feel a little inferior. It's all your fault, Lin Shen said, stamping his feet and turning his head away in frustration. After listening, Lin Shen stepped sideways and came to Lin Shen. He stretched out his hand to scratch the other's nose, with a little doting in his eyes. Blame me, but I specially developed this mecha for you to experience first. Lin Shen looked at Lin Shen with a smile, and then glanced around and found a stall selling candied haws next to him. He quickly went over to buy a bunch and handed it to Lin Shen, which made her smile again. In that case, I will reluctantly forgive you. It's so sweet. You should have a bite too. Lin Shen handed the candied haws in his hand to Lin Shen's mouth, and Lin Shen took a big bite without hesitation. He bit off 2 candied haws directly. The two walked down the street, feeling extremely relaxed. Being immersed in research for a long time was a huge drain on their body and mind. It would be much better if they went out for a walk today. By the way, I want to continue my research tomorrow. Compared to others, I feel that I am still far behind. And as my boyfriend, you are so outstanding, of course I have to surpass you. Lin Shen hesitated for a moment, then looked up at Lin Shen. Unexpectedly, Lin Shen nodded and agreed without hesitation. No problem, I will continue to improve the mecha in the factory during the day, but you have to accompany me to go shopping at night, which can be regarded as a combination of work and rest. Lin Shen naturally had no objection to this. The two smiled at each other and walked towards the direction of the Lin family. After returning, they naturally could not avoid their parents' questions. After all, when the chief said such a news, the actual policy had already been issued. Even today, there were high-level officials in Bingcheng who directly invited Lin's father and mother to visit, and they were very polite to them. After finally calming down his parents, Lin Shen was finally able to rest for a while. Chapter 75. If it doesn't work, throw the scraps to the scrap collector. The following time was naturally very pleasant. I would study in the factory during the day and go out for a walk and rest at night. It was like a fairy-like life. However, the leader sent someone to ask whether the mecha could be mass-produced. To this, Lin Shen naturally gave a positive answer. It can definitely be mass-produced, but even if it is mass-produced, it can only be produced in their factory. The main thing is that if it changes to a new location, the machinery in the factory will have to be upgraded again, which is a huge project, and the production speed of their factory will naturally not be very fast. Being able to complete one machine a month is almost the limit. Lin, why don't I take the lead in making the second mecha? It just happens to give us a chance to get familiar with it. In the factory, Zihuan, Professor Wang and others looked at Lin Shen with a smile, their eyes full of expectations. To be honest, they had already had the idea of making it themselves at the beginning of the research. However, they were afraid that because of their lack of proficiency, they would lose the best materials, so they did not dare to start. Now that the higher-ups have started asking questions, isn't this a perfect opportunity to practice? Sure, I've just made some adjustments and improvements to the mecha's weapons. You guys make the main body of the mecha, and I'll take care of the weapons. Lin Shen nodded without hesitation. He was happy to do the work when others were rushing to do it. But in addition to that, he also specially drafted a special operating system for the mecha. It's not that he dislikes it, it's just that the current intelligent eye system is too laggy. With just the eye that he tried before, Lin Shen couldn't achieve full automatic control of the mecha. Especially when he switched modes before, he still had to switch manually. It's not that he didn't want to switch by voice, but the situation didn't allow it. So the control system of the mecha naturally needs to be upgraded. Thinking of this in his heart, Lin Shen turned around and prepared to try it, but was pulled back by Zihuan. Wait, Lin, since you can start preparing to try it, then the problem of materials. As he spoke, Zihuan was already looking at him with a smile on his face, with strong expectations in his eyes. I almost forgot to give you the material ratio. Lin Shen patted his head and suddenly remembered something. Then he went to the computer next to him, typed a few words, and then wrote down the material formula and operation method. By the way, old Z, there are some waste materials from the previous mecha production behind the warehouse. You can find someone to deal with it. Before leaving, Lin Shen thought of something and said, "No problem, leave the waste materials to me." "But are the waste materials you are talking about the same material as the mecha production?" "Yes, but the waste materials are too small and don't seem to be enough for any other purpose. If it doesn't work, sell it to the scrap metal collector. The weight is quite a lot. About 10 tons. Lin Shen shrugged indifferently. He was originally planning to solve the garbage problem by himself. Now it seems that someone has helped him deal with it, so naturally he doesn't have to work hard. Zihuan nodded subconsciously, but suddenly he seemed to think of something and raised his head suddenly. "Wait, come back here. You said that the scraps are the leftovers for making mechas, and you actually asked me to sell this kind of stuff to a scrap collector?" Zihuan's voice was getting louder and louder, and Lin Shen's eyes were a little confused. "Yeah, what's wrong?" "The materials are too small, and they are not enough to make any mecha. Other than that, they have no use for us at all, so why not sell them?" Lin Shen looked indifferent, which made Zihuan and others very angry. This is the material of the mecha. Although it is a scrap, such a hard thing, can't it be used to make other things if it is not used to make mechas? You have to know that other hard materials in the world are extremely rare, not to mention that it is more than 10 tons of scraps. So you just want to sell this thing for money? Do you know how much of a headache our country has for materials? These extremely scarce scraps, let alone you specifically sell them, the country will buy them in large quantities just because you spread the news. Even the price you offer is unprecedented in the world. And you, a bastard, are you actually buying scraps? Besides, even if they are scraps, what's wrong with them? Aren't these scraps scarce materials? Zihuan's mouth was like a submachine gun, firing non-stop. Lin Shen was almost spitting all over his face, and at this time, his face showed a little numbness. Blinking slightly, he felt that Zihuan seemed to have misunderstood something. But don't say that he really didn't expect that these scraps would be so valued by someone. After scolding for a while, Zihuan finally calmed down, staring at Lin Shen with his eyes fixed. "Don't buy them, just give them away for free if someone wants them. They are not worth much anyway." Lin Shen wiped the saliva from his face with a little helplessness, and a trace of disgust appeared in his eyes. Zihuan had just calmed down, but he almost choked when he heard this. Thanks to Gozian who helped him up, the old man didn't fall to the ground. Even Professor Wang couldn't stand this Versailles behavior. I coughed dryly to signal him to say less. Seeing the look on everyone's faces, Lin Shen immediately understood that they seemed to have misunderstood something. "I think you should go and see the ratio of the materials, and then you will know why I want to deal with this patch of materials at will." Helplessly holding his forehead, Lin Shen pointed to the computer interface not far away. Zihuan glared at him fiercely, then pushed Gozian away and came to the front of the computer. But when he saw the materials on it clearly, he was stunned, and then a little dullness flashed between his eyebrows. How is this possible? How do these things form rare materials? These are the most common metals, and with so many, how can they form a perfect fusion situation? Zihuan was stunned at the first sight, and the others came over one after another. They all had a curious look on their faces, wanting to see what kind of material could shock Zihuan like this. After all, they were all worldly wise people, how could they be so fragile? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.